Hello, everybody, for the second episode we've recorded today of the Deadliest Warrior podcast. I'm your host today, Craig Taylor, joined by my co-host
Matt Davis, representing former President Theodore Roosevelt.
Hell yeah!
I finally get to be patriotic this episode.
Right. You have to make up for the last one we recorded.
I know, jeez.
Yeah.
Where I had to represent North Korea. Good Lord.
And
That's a task and a half, right?
And I'm Lucas, representing not the American for probably like the first time.
Yeah.
Lawrence of Arabia, my boy.
Yeah.
Gets done dirty. Just
You know,
wanna say
it's
that.
funny you bring it up because we talked about, I think last time we recorded, about our win-loss totals. And Lucas, I think, has probably our best because he always picks like America and they almost always win.
He
so.
does. I counted everything up, and I'm a close second, but you have the most wins, and Craig has like 3, I think.
Yeah, 3. I'm like 3 and 8.
Yeah.
So, and then as always, got Brendan on the 1s and 2s.
Hello.
Yeah.
Still haven't got those 3s and 4s.
Right. We'll upgrade next season.
Yep.
So this. Oh, also I forgot. We got our special guest with a special twist.
Mike, big Ted head here. I have actually no expertise whatsoever other than carrying a big stick and speaking softly.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, Mike actually, he's the proprietor of the TED Talks, which exclusively talks about Teddy Roosevelt.
But Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, it appears you're running a Civ 6 game playing as Teddy Roosevelt.
Not only as Teddy Roosevelt, but as Teddy Roosevelt Rough Rider persona. So
Nice.
I'm ready for this episode.
Hell yeah.
Playing as one of the experts from this episode.
Yeah, you shouldn't have called it Civ. It's a highly advanced sim that we developed.
Right.
We're experimenting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
The Rough Rider unit is in that advanced sim.
Well, you know what? So we're doing it for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of funny. 2, it helps in those long stretches. You know, that's some ADD fuel for you. And 3, I think it might actually be interesting to see how Teddy Roosevelt's portrayed in Civ and how that might compare with, real life. So like what makes him different? That's because XYZ. So, but we'll get to that.
He's an actual warrior in the game.
Yeah.
It is funny, Lucas. We do have our roles typically on this show. It just kind of formed organically. You usually get the the brutes or the American trooper, and one of the recurring roles I have to take on usually is like the triggered nerd European warrior. Like, I can't believe my Roman lost. I can't believe Napoleon lost. So finally, I get to be loud and win this time. Damn it!
Yeah, but the difference between they all sucked and Lawrence is cool. Honestly,
I won't argue Lawrence is cool, but
I completely this episode. I have pretty much no memory of it, and honestly, going back and watching this one felt like a fresh watch for me. And that also gave me the thought. Imagine if you were showing someone like this show for the first time, and this was the first episode. You're like, dude, it's a show about history's deadliest warriors. Oh, that sounds awesome. Who's this week? Teddy Roosevelt and Lawrence of Arabia.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
It was just to give my initial thoughts here. This was an episode I had not watched since it premiered. I watched it when it came out, and I don't think I watched it ever since then. I remembered the Gatling gun.
I didn't. It even skipped my memory because normally every episode has that key part that everyone's like, oh yeah. Remember the Joan of Arc cannon? Remember
That's the part I remembered, the Gatling gun.
Yeah, I couldn't even remember that.
But I've rewatched it about 5 times. I'm not kidding, in preparation of this episode. And so about the 5th watch, I was a little sick of it, but it was a good episode. I actually enjoy watching this one.
I like this episode.
Yeah.
It's not terrible.
It's not perfect.
I say that now before we get into it.
It's not perfect, but I actually did enjoy watching this one. So
I found Philip of Spain.
dude, it's
First
meant to
big note.
be.
Season 5's Deadliest Warrior.
Yeah. Dude, you're gonna have to take San Juan Hill from that guy.
All right. I don't have Rough Riders, so I can't declare war on him yet. So gotta be peaceful out.
It's coming though, right? You're going to declare war?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, Spain will do something bad to one of our boats.
Yeah, I will get a naval ship out
We'll
there.
declare war in self-defense.
When we'll win and they won't ever come back.
I love that line. Yeah. All right, I'm sorry. Let's get into this bad boy.
Oh, I found Spain again.
But this was already a mistake. We're committed. Okay. So, Matt, do you want to give us our intros?
Yes.
Matt's intro corner.
Let's keep inventing new things.
Teddy Roosevelt, the all-American hero who led his famous Rough Riders on a suicide charge to turn the tide of the Spanish-American War, versus Lawrence of Arabia, Great Britain's first special operative. He built a fierce Arab army to fight against the powerful Turkish Ottoman Empire and helped seal the Allied victory in the First World War.
Little known fact about Lawrence.
Also dope on the mic. I'm sorry, you served the fucking slow pitch down the center for me.
Don't worry, what I was about to say was just as important. Little known fact about Lawrence. He wasn't from Arabia. He was from Britain.
Right. This is true.
Yeah, so let's just get into the stats. Let's just jump right into it. Teddy Roosevelt, stats circa 1898, 39 years old, so relatively old to be in a Deadliest Warrior matchup. Height 5'8", weight 210, bit of a short king.
He's a beefcake.
Yeah,
He's a big stocky beefcake.
Yeah. He had severe asthma and vision issues, which I'm sure in Lucas's medical corner
perhaps
we're going to cover. And I wrote trained heavily. Okay.
Yeah. Supposedly he could run a 5-minute mile.
Dang.
Oh, are you talking about? I'm sorry, you're still on Teddy.
Yeah.
My bad.
Yeah, I'd like to see Teddy run a 5-minute mile.
Maybe on a horse.
Yeah. So let's get into Teddy. I guess my prompt here was Teddy Roosevelt cool, and isn't he supposed to be a little chubby?
Mike, you want to take this on for a second?
Yeah, I'll start on Teddy Roosevelt.
I have quite a few notes here.
So Teddy Roosevelt leads the American Civ. In his Rough Rider persona, units receive 5% combat strength on their home continent. Envoys to city-states, you have a trade route with kind of 2 envoys. So, make sure you get your trade routes to city-states. I have city-states turned off this game because I'm just trying to take over Spain. Teddy Roosevelt also gets a unique unit, the Rough Rider, an American unique industrial era unit when Teddy Roosevelt is their leader that replaces the cuirassiers. Cultures earned from their kills on their capital's contents, plus 10 combat strength when fighting on hills, and they have a lower maintenance cost. So
that's big.
That's all the Teddy background you need.
Why is he dressed like Fred from Scooby-Doo?
More importantly, why is Fred from Scooby-Doo dressed like Rough Rider persona Teddy Roosevelt?
Yeah, that's the real question.
That's the real question. Yep.
True. Well, thank you for that, Mike.
You're welcome.
Any other facts about Teddy Roosevelt we should know before we move on?
Yeah, I can take over. So, the show gives a quick recap saying he was a sickly boy and he was unhappy with his father's decision to sit out the Civil War. Teddy comes from money. The Roosevelts are a pretty well-off family, and so rich people don't fight in wars. Why did they always send the poor? Am I right?
A sickly rich boy. Sounds like a real warrior.
All right. So this sort of put a chip on Teddy's shoulder. He was an incredibly ambitious guy, and he was also very intelligent. And the important combination is that he had these resources from his family. So, like, Teddy grows up, he lives what he decides to call, he coins it the strenuous life. He believes that he's got to push his physical limits. He's an avid boxer. He's a sportsman for his entire life. He's also an Ivy League graduate and an avid reader. And historians actually estimate that he read about several books a day on average. And they say he is the most well-read American president, tied with Thomas Jefferson. So kind of fun fact, because Teddy Roosevelt is a bit of a Reddit-ass president. Like, his whole thing is giving those, like, epic quotes, like speak softly, carry a big stick, and
he's the guy like your dad likes.
Oh yeah,
he's like a dad hero.
Yeah, if you're watching the show, your dad loves Teddy Roosevelt.
Also, maybe rather than Reddit, I think he more embodies Ty Lopez. He reads a book a day. He's got all this good advice.
Yeah, right. He's got that Sigma male grind set. Yes.
Yeah.
But Teddy Roosevelt, I was surprised at how smart of a dude he was, and this guy might have the most interesting fucking life of any like historical figure. I like just condensed it down to the stuff relevant to this show. So, Teddy Roosevelt at the start of the Spanish-American War, you know, they bring up how the USS Maine gets sunk in Havana Harbor. There's some debate over what happened there these days. You know, I'm like the conspiracy guy on this show. I always love talking about it. People don't know whether it was an accident or whether the Spanish blew it up or Cuban rebels, or, you know, the big truther one is, did America blow it up so they could invade Cuba? I don't know, but I do know this. When the war kicked off, Teddy Roosevelt resigned his post as Secretary of Navy, and working with Army Colonel Leonard Wood, they formed the 1st U.S. Volunteer Cavalry Regiment, later known as the Rough Riders. As the show states, the unit was made up of people from many walks of life, including Native Americans. I will point out, though, the Army was still segregated, so there were no African Americans, although Teddy did command some black soldiers at the Battle of San Juan Hill. So, the Rough Riders fought in several battles during the Spanish-American War, the most famous, of course, being the Battle of San Juan Heights, specifically the charge up Kettle Hill. This battle is usually referred to as the Battle of San Juan Hill. So San Juan Hill, San Juan Heights, they mean the same thing. Kettleback Hill, or Kettle Hill, rather. Kettleblacks are from Game of Thrones. Kettle Hill is a part of the San Juan Heights. So he leads them in a charge up the hill, and I'll talk about that more when we talk about in Mac's touch table section. I'll get into that battle specifically. After the war, Teddy became the governor of New York, making a big name for himself in the game of politics. Eventually, he became vice president to William McKinley, and eventually president of the United States after McKinley was assassinated in 1901. Roosevelt served the remainder of McKinley's term and won re-election in 1904. He was a big supporter of progressive policies, antitrust laws, and American interventionism abroad. So Teddy Roosevelt, they talk about it a little bit in this episode. They don't say it directly, but they make little comments here and there about Teddy did want the United States. Like, our last American president we had on here was George Washington. And George Washington was very avid about that the United States should mind its own fucking business and stay out of the clusterfuck that is Europe and not deal with any of that stuff. Teddy Roosevelt had the opposite mind. He was like, for us to be relevant, for us to be powerful, we gotta always have our hand in the cookie jar there. So he would eventually run for president again under a third party in 1912 known as the Progressive Party or the Bull Moose Party. In October of 1912, he survived an assassination attempt on his own life when he was shot in the chest from 7 feet away by a .38 caliber Colt pistol police positive special. The bullet lodged in his chest muscle but did not hit any vital organs, as it was slowed down by Teddy's steel eyeglass case and a 50-page thick single-folded copy of a speech he was delivering that day. So, like a fucking movie. Like, he got shot here, where his heart, around where his heart would be. It goes through a steel eyeglass case, through this 50-page thick speech, and lodges in his pectoral muscle, but doesn't hit any vital organs.
Yeah, what was really major about that, when you get shot in that area, it typically causes a pneumothorax, where air essentially gets in and creates negative pressure on your lungs, and it didn't. And that is part of the reason he lived.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
After being shot, he encouraged people that he was all right. He prevented the would-be assassin from being lynched on the spot because he was there to deliver a speech. So he's in a crowd with like his supporters. So this guy shoots Teddy Roosevelt, and they're all like, they're rushing to just kill this guy on the spot. And Teddy is actually the one who prevents them from killing him because he wanted him to be arrested. And then he went on to deliver a 90-minute speech before receiving medical attention. Teddy would go on to carry the bullet in his chest for the remainder of his life, as doctors determined it was too risky to try and remove. He would lose the election of 1912 to Woodrow Wilson and go on to do a million more crazy things, like trekking across the Amazon forest. Eventually, Teddy would pass away in January of 1919 from a blood clot at the age of 60. In 2001, he was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions at San Juan Heights. Teddy considered leading the charge uphill to be the greatest moment of his life. He considered it, and this was a guy that was all about trying to live like a very full, crazy life. He considered that to be the defining moment of his life. So,
I want to say something.
Okay.
Sometimes we get experts on Deadliest Warrior, and you're like, wow, that's a really fantastic. That story is almost unbelievable. Listen, it's been a while since this stuff happened. Can we be sure all this shit happened?
That he got shot there?
Just any of it.
I mean, the bullet's probably still in his corpse.
Yeah.
Or in his skeleton, probably by now.
This is a shout out to Adam, who we had on the George Washington show. Adam is a history buff, teaches history, and we have a running bit that we always like to talk about how, a lot of American presidents have been assassinated, and almost every single time it is just a guy walks up to the president with a gun and shoots him. And for every one that's happened, there's like 2 that were attempted. So Abraham Lincoln, you can count as someone just fucking walked up and shot him. Teddy Roosevelt became president because someone walked up and shot William McKinley point blank, the same way they shot Teddy Roosevelt point blank. My favorite assassination story, though, is actually Andrew Jackson. He's got the best one. So in that story, some guy, Andrew Jackson's like fucking 100 years old. He's like a freaking corpse, living in the White House. And this guy attempts to shoot Andrew Jackson. He brings 2 pistols and they both misfire because they're both like flintlocks. Andrew Jackson beats this guy with his cane, and it's notorious that his Secret Service had to pull Andrew Jackson off of the guy or he was going to fucking beat him to death. So, great story. There's also Andrew Jackson's another guy that got in a duel. He got fucking shot in the chest and just didn't die. And, the bullet stayed lodged in there
back
forever.
then, like, those guns didn't have the same like capabilities.
Ballistics, yeah.
That ours guns. Did you mention it in your story? It was actually someone would have got a better place shot. They aimed it at his head initially, and a bystander. Did you say this?
No.
A bystander actually saw the glint of the gun. And, like, hit it out of the.
Sorry,
smacked it.
I didn't read that. So
yeah, I saw that off like a little.
Yeah.
Like side thing when I was looking further into it. Yeah, a bystander saw like the gun and smacked it down, and that's why it shot at his chest instead of his head.
Yeah. Well, we can go more into the history of the Rough Riders and the battle that's showcased on this show during the battlefield tactics session.
I just wanted to make a small note.
Yeah.
Matt, when you were researching this, I don't know, I didn't do as much research on this, but just like a small, like bringing Teddy Roosevelt as a warrior. If you just look at his Wikipedia, one of the smallest entries is about his like military career, which is like really interesting that this show is like propping him up as this big warrior, this big American hero. It's like, that's kind of like a footnote to his career as a whole, as a politician, at least. Compared to like George Washington, who was our first general and the only 6-star general that ever existed.
Yeah. I mean, fans know I have a lot of opinions about that Washington episode, but one thing I will not argue is George Washington 100% falls under the qualifications of a warrior. Yeah. I don't know, like Teddy Roosevelt fought in a battle. That's more action than I've ever seen. I don't know as though it's anywhere on par with the stuff that Lawrence of Arabia did. Like Lawrence of Arabia's resume of fighting for years and doing all this wild shit in the desert.
I mean, he did like 20 plus years of actual like military service.
Unprecedented stuff. So we always make fun of the cliche on here because they're constantly saying like knights were the Green Berets of medieval Europe, you know, and they mention that Lawrence is like the first.
Yeah, maybe not 20, but
close. They mention that he's like the first special operative, and that is like that might be true. I don't know if he's the first, but he's definitely an inspiration for special forces going forward. Like the stuff he does is pretty incredible versus Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, he was rich enough and influential enough that he could assemble this group of guys to go fight in the Spanish-American War, which, you know, was kind of a layup for America. We really sailed in there and kind of the Caribbeans really didn't have a chance. And, you know, he's sort of famous for this one particular battle, which he is just, as we'll get into, a part of a bigger offensive. But I think it's only popular because of how popular he became back home, you know, with all of his politics and stuff. So, does he fall under the warrior? I mean, who am I to say? But it does seem, when you see this, it's like, is he the same caliber of warrior as like Lawrence of Arabia? I don't know. I kind of question it a little bit. So, yeah, that's my answer to your question, Mike. Yeah.
I did write for Lawrence of Arabia, just on my notes. It's like, there's the quote, Great Britain's first special operative, and I was like, essentially the first Delta Force is what this show's getting at.
Right, yeah. Pirates were the first Delta Force.
The first Captain Price.
Yep.
Okay. Let's get on to Mr. Lawrence. So, stats.
Sir Lawrence.
I'm sorry. Circa 1916, age 29, 20-year age difference, 5'5", definitely a short king, and 130 pounds, major weight difference. So if we're talking guns, so this is a lot more negligible compared to if they were ancient warriors, but very large difference in terms of age, height, weight. Says could run a mile under 5 minutes, didn't drink or smoke, and spoke 7 languages and was a student of architecture. Who is this guy? And is there not overtly, but like a tinge of Great White Hope vibes coming from Lawrence of Arabia?
I can answer that with yes. That's very much a part of it.
Let me tell you, there's a lot of information on him. Let me tell you everything I can learn in like 24 hours of research. So, Thomas Edward Lawrence was a British archaeologist, army officer, diplomat, and writer. He was born out of wedlock August 16th, 1888, in Carnarvonshire, Wales, to Sarah Journer, a governess, and Sir Thomas Chapman, an Anglo-Irish nobleman. As a kid, he moved to Oxford, where he attended high school and then studied history at Jesus College from 1907 to 1910. Then worked as an archaeologist for the British Museum, chiefly at Carchemish in Syria. So whenever war broke out, the big one, in 1914, he volunteered. In 1914, he volunteered for the British Army and was stationed at the Arab Bureau Intelligence Unit in Egypt. So in 1916, he traveled to Mesopotamia and to Arabia on intelligence missions and became involved in the Arab Revolt as a liaison to the Arab forces. He worked closely with leaders of the revolt and participated sometimes even as a leader in military actions against the Ottoman armed forces, culminating in the capture of Damascus in October 1918. Grab a drink real quick. Getting dry mouth. Some of his notable battles from 1917 and 1918 were the attack on the Ottoman outpost in Hejaz, an attack on the railway at Abba al-Nam, attack on a bridge at Ras Belbek. That was routing of the Ottoman forces at Abba al-Liaison. Several attacks on various railways. This dude loved attacking railways because that was supply lines, and they would blow up the trains on them constantly.
Trolling. We do a little trolling. Insert the Trump clip. Trolling. We do a little trolling.
Well, he was trolling them, especially between Daria and Amen. The Battle of Tal Afar, which was a defensive engagement that turned into an offensive rout in which Lawrence was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for his leadership and promoted to lieutenant colonel. There was an attack on the retreating Ottomans and Germans near the village of Tafas. The Ottoman forces massacred the villagers, and the Arab forces, in return, massacred their prisoners with Lawrence's encouragement. So after World War I, he joined the British Foreign Office until he retreated from the public eye in 1922. During this time, he served in the Royal Air Force until 1935, with a brief period in the Army. And this is whenever he published his best-known work, 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which was an autobiographical account of his participation in the Arab Revolt. So his public image and nickname resulted as part of the sensationalized reporting of the Arab Revolt by American journalist Lowell Thomas, as well as his own book that I just mentioned. He died May 19th, 1935, at the age of 46, after being injured in a motorcycle accident in Dorset, England. So I will address this, because there's debate on the subject. There's speculation that Lawrence of Arabia was gay. In his own writings, he denied any personal experience of sexual encounters, but his friends expressed the opinion that he was asexual. For some reason, this has been like a big point of study about him. So many people believe because homosexuality had very strong opposition during this time period in the location that he was at, but his views were very tolerant of it. Many believe that he may have been like secretly gay, although there is considerable evidence that Lawrence was a masochist.
Oh, yeah.
He wrote a description of the Daira's beatings that was a delicious warmth, probably sexual, was swelling through me. He described the guards' whips in a style typical of masochist writing, and later in life, Lawrence arranged to pay a military colleague to administer beatings to him to be subjected to severe formal tests of fitness and stamina.
Huh.
Well, I got news for you.
That means you're gay.
That means you're gay.
French novelist André Malraux admired Lawrence, but wrote that he had a taste for self-humiliation, now by discipline, and now by veneration, a horror of respectability, a disgust for possessions.
I might be joining Team Lawrence.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Bad boy.
Many people believed he developed these tendencies from childhood beatings he received from his mother for routine misbehaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas's health corner.
That makes two of us.
Here.
Yeah.
So over the course of fighting, he'd been very sick with dysentery, malaria, and he had a deep festering saddle sore from the saddle.
That makes two of us.
Allegedly.
Yeah, right.
From the constant fighting, Lawrence had tons of scars all over his body and has even been taken prisoner. He claimed in his own account that he received violent sexual assaults, which scarred him physically and mentally whenever he was taken prisoner. Ultimately, what led to his early death was the head trauma he suffered during a motorcycle accident. He was riding a Bureau Superior SS-10-0, which had been given to him by the playwright George Bernard Shaw. While riding, he had to swerve suddenly to avoid 2 boys riding their bicycles and was thrown over the handlebars. He was rushed to the hospital in Bovington, where he remained in a coma until his death 6 days later. So this caused international stir with his death and heavily affected the surgeon Hugh Carnes, who was unable to save him. He had not been wearing a helmet at the time of the accident, so Hugh kind of made it his life mission to make sure that motorcyclists wore head protection. He started publishing all these studies. He undertook this pioneering study on the mortality and brain injuries suffered by these accidents, and ultimately made the use of helmet mandatory for motorcyclists in the British Army, November 1941. And it's probably a good idea if you're going to ride a motorcycle to wear a helmet.
The doctor goes up to his mom. He's like, Mrs. Arabia, he did make it.
I'll cover some notes on Teddy real quick. I was going to cover the bullet. You already got me there. So it is said that without his glasses, his vision was so bad he couldn't even recognize his own sons on multiple accounts. He had a few episodes of unconsciousness as a result of playing polo or from boxing matches.
Yes. Yeah. When he was older, he was boxing during his presidency, and he actually got was it blinded in one eye?
Yeah, I got that on here.
From a blow in boxing that wasn't made public till like many years later. And that he stopped boxing after that.
Yeah, maybe I didn't. I did remember reading that.
Yeah, right.
I remember reading that. Yeah, he lost the vision. So whenever he was in the hospital from being shot, because he had to stay in there and rest a little bit, he reportedly snored so loudly that every other patient filed a complaint against him.
Teddy Roosevelt, of any warrior we've encountered, Deadliest Warrior, he is the biggest snoozer. Can you think of a bigger snoozer that we've covered on this show?
I will say, as someone who snores loud anytime they drink, I'm with you there, Teddy. Sorry. Snore Kings.
He lost complete hearing. The Snore Kings. He lost complete hearing in his left ear.
That's what it was. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't sight. It was hearing in his left
Yeah.
ear. Sorry.
And then near the end of his life, which some people think contributed towards it, he picked up a very nasty blood infection in South America also.
Yeah, that's when that trek through the Amazon I mentioned.
Good idea.
It was so he lived that strenuous ass life until he got old. He did that Amazon thing and got fucking sick and was like, no more traveling. And before that, it was the boxing. Like he got hit in the ear and got deafened. And he was like, you can picture the moment he had where like, he's looking in the mirror and he's like, you're getting old, Teddy.
Yeah.
He's like, it's the best of times. Yep. It was the worst of times.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, why don't we move on to our experts? But before that, I got to check in with Mike. How's the game going?
The game is going well. So I started in the industrial era on a marathon game. So I'm still trying to get rifling so we can get some Rough Riders out there. Got a little nationalism picking up there.
Perfect.
Good. 25 turns till nationalism.
That's vintage
like
Teddy.
Unfortunately, since I am playing on a domination victory, after nationalism, I am going to have to go for fascism. It's just tradition for the perfect domination game.
Ideally, you would not pick that, right? If you could help it.
Teddy, the game promotes it for domination. So it's not me. It's the game's mechanics. Don't blame me. Blame Sid.
I will say, if I could add to your Lawrence notes, Lucas, Lawrence was often hated by his superiors because Lawrence was anti-imperialist. He didn't like the fact that the British Empire was spread all over the planet, and
the British Empire's done nothing but good.
Right. He didn't like the British Empire, and he made his views known. And the reason he got stationed with the Arabs is because he could speak the language, but he learned all that because he respected these cultures. And during the war, there was actually quite a bit of controversy because he was tasked to go unite these tribes to help fight against the Turks. And one of the deals that was made was like, if you guys help us, we won't occupy your territory anymore. And that was a lie, obviously.
Yeah.
That was a lie.
I think there's debate over whether Lawrence was knew that was going to be a lie or not. But I do know that his superiors were not huge fans, and he had a lot of thoughts about empire and war, and
war never changes.
Never changes. So. Interesting figure in that respect, I think, as well.
So what you're summing up here is that Lawrence of Arabia had a lot more battle experience, but Teddy weighed more, so they equal out.
Right, it does weigh more. Teddy has a Gatling gun. Do you want me to do Matt's movie corner real quick, Craig, before the experts? Matt's movie corner, welcome. So the biggest movie here is probably the 1962 Lawrence of Arabia film. Critically acclaimed. If you are a film buff, I mean, it's considered one of the golden age classics, so you have to watch it. I did watch it personally many months ago. It wasn't for this show. I checked it out because it was on a movie poster. So listen, I watched it and gotta say, I was not a fan. It is 3 hours and 42 minutes.
Jeez, too long.
It's from 1962. And let's just say the Prince of the Arabs that Lawrence goes to meet is played by Alec Guinness, who played Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he is covered in brown face. So, critically acclaimed movie of the time. Check it out if that's your thing. But if it's not, if you're looking for a more pop culture punch, check out the Doomed film that came out in 2021, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, because the story of Dune, the main character, Paul, heavily inspired by the story of Lawrence of Arabia. So, and for you, those of you inclined to crack a book out there, I know it's not many of you, fucking Zoomers.
Teddy out there, I see you.
Yeah, you Teddies out there reading 7 a day, several a day. Frank Herbert's Dune, good read, worth picking up. There's also There's Vickers guns in quite a few movies. I didn't write any down because I figured his quota was met here.
The new challenge, you have to find a movie for each weapon.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Can I go back to the M4? Because it's in every movie.
7 books a day, though.
Several.
Oh, I thought you said 7, like every day. Like he's like,
no.
1 fish, 2 fish.
And of course,
red fish, blue fish. Okay.
That's an estimated average, of course. So it's like over a lifetime, it averages out to like several books a day. I'm sure there was times where he didn't read anything.
Oh, I heard you was like 7 a day. Like, gotta get 7 a day.
Every
Harry Potter.
Every Harry Potter book in one day. Yeah. So for Teddy movies, starting off rough here. So there was a movie called The Rough Riders that came out in 1927. I always like to get these classics on here. However, it has horrible critic reviews. I think it had a 1 out of 5 on IMDb, so I wasn't wasting my time with it.
Rough Riders? More like the rough movie.
Yeah, rough to get through.
Now shut up for a minute.
A little more promising was Rough Riders TV miniseries that came out in 1997, starring Tom Berenger, Sam Elliott, and Gary Busey. I didn't get a chance to watch it, but the reviews are pretty decent, so I don't know if you want to check that out, you can. The most likely depiction you, the general audience, has seen, probably the big pop culture portrayal of Teddy, is Robin Williams in Night at the Museum. So that's the one everybody knows.
Him stars aside Jedediah.
Stars aside Jedediah. You guys are gonna get me going again. So for the lack of Teddy movies, I went ahead and another Hollywood favorite is the Gatling gun. And of course, it's the Gatling gun eventually becomes the minigun, as they talk about in this. And so I wanted to give a few scenes. So a lot of Western classics like Fistful of Dollars features Gatling guns. 2 scenes, though, I personally recommend. Okay. Number 1, I'm going to give you a minigun scene. Terminator 2. When Arnold's up in the building with the minigun shooting, holding off the LAPD or whatever. Very iconic minigun scene. A lot of gun porn in that.
No deaths.
Yeah, and 0 deaths. The best Gatling gun scene, though, in my opinion, actually comes from the 2003 movie The Last Samurai, starring Tom Cruise.
Speaking of Great White Hope.
Right, yes, that is a Great White Hope movie. But at the end of the movie, the samurai all charge into the modern Japanese army, and they've got guns. And the final death, they've got guns and cannons, and the samurai, they're taking heavy casualties, but they keep riding forward. And eventually the samurai do pull out the Gatling guns. And they're loaded the same way, hand cranked, and that's sort of... It's almost like in that movie, the Gatling gun ends the samurai, basically. So, of which Tom Cruise was apparently the last one. So, so those are my recommendations for movies and shows. For video games, you can fire both a Gatling gun, or I don't think the Vickers is any of them. I'm sorry, I got confused. But you can fire a Gatling gun in Red Dead Redemption. I think
multiple, like an on-rails section.
Multiple
Earlier,
Red Dead games.
Before that, the original Red Dead Revolver, Fort Diego mission, you get pinned down by like the crank Gatling gun. Great game.
Yeah.
You've never played the original Red Dead Revolver. It's PlayStation 2, so it's rough graphics, but it's a really good game.
Yeah.
Follows Red Harlow.
And then Civ 6, which Mike's playing right now, where Teddy Roosevelt is the leader for the American faction. So
I do have a big announcement. I did unlock the Rough Riders.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go.
We're getting ready.
What makes the Rough Riders stand out? What are their abilities?
So the Rough Riders get cultures earned from kills on their capital's content. So, murdering people get nice culture. They get plus 10 strength when fighting on hills, and they have a lower maintenance cost. So, it's all nice.
Are they a ranged cavalry unit?
No.
Okay.
All
right.
It's actually how America developed its culture, is just killing. The more cultures it killed,
the more people they killed,
that fed into the machine.
Greater it grew.
All right. Well, let's get into Craig's expert corner. Intro. Okay. So actually, nothing too exciting. Don't get your hopes up. For Larry, we got Richard Reed. He's a British firearms specialist, is what they bill him in the show. Say special forces and espionage training from the British Army. Research, all you see when you Google him is articles on the 2001 shoe bomber with the same name, who's also British.
I saw that too. I was like, don't Google.
I was like, is this him? And I was, no.
Nope.
Richard Allen Reed is an actor. And his only other role that I could tell is that he played a Gryffindor prefect in the first Harry Potter movie.
That is so funny.
So British.
He looks like a fucking Harry Potter guy.
I can't tell if I found the right Richard Reed or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
If because what I found too is that he was known for like the Book of Love, Once Upon a Time in Londongrad, and Snoop and Martha, like some Halloween special.
Oh, those are some of my favorite movies.
Yeah. But he's also the senior vice president of BuzzFeed.
Oh, so he does like, well, not, I don't know. He works in some division of BuzzFeed. I saw.
Boo. I don't like BuzzFeed's boring.
All right.
Shout out BuzzFeed.
Come on the pod.
If you're watching, I apologize.
You guys' notes are way different. I have that he's the leader of the Fantastic. You know what? That's Reed Richards.
Oh, yeah.
Shit.
Yeah.
My bad, dude. My bad. Sorry. Greg's so disappointed.
Well, on IMDb too, this is like mildly interesting. It lists him as Lawrence himself. Like normally when you look up IMDb, you see an expert. It's so-and-so Deadliest Warrior as themselves.
Mm-hmm.
This, it says that he plays Lawrence of Arabia, but I think that's just a mistype and incorrect because like how dumb to think we'd have to be for the warrior to be played by one of the experts.
Look, Snoop and Martha's very tasty Halloween trailer films with Richard Allen Reed. That's him, right?
Yeah, he's in the scene where Snoop's smoking weed and Martha's like, Snoop, don't smoke that weed.
Wow, that looks like a great movie.
I didn't say it was a great movie. I mean, it's no pool party.
We're gonna have to back that with a pool party.
Yeah. I kind of want to find Pool Party.
I do too.
Hey, I'm just getting the facts.
I'll see if it's on like Amazon or something. Okay, moving on. We got Gavin Scott. You tell Gavin that British fuck. Okay. Gavin. So he's a former BBC reporter. He's a renowned T.E. Lawrence scholar, and they bill him as a T.E. Lawrence historian. This is a little moniker. Research is that he appears to be a writer, and not much to say about Deadliest Warrior or Lawrence of Arabia specifically. So I don't know. Maybe that T.E. Lawrence stuff was just made up, but he's definitely a writer. He gives off the air of a college professor, even though he isn't one.
He does. He's got like the most British professor face I've ever seen. He's like, but if anyone can handle the kind of punishment you're talking about, it's Lawrence.
Is he the one where I said he looks like he has a really ugly daughter?
Yes.
He just looks like a guy. Can you imagine like a daughter, but with his same face?
Ms. Scott, I'm sure you're beautiful. All right. If you exist.
Call me. The other thing too is when we were watching the Gatling gun test, he like looks approvingly in British too. Yeah. Just the way he looks, he's like
oh yes, I'm fine.
Yeah. So he's sort of, there's this typically dynamic in season 3 where you have the muscle and then the brains.
Yep.
And the muscle's the primary expert. The brains is like the secondary. They usually do like the tactics, and he's definitely the brains in this case.
Yep.
I tried to look up some of like what he wrote since he is like a writer, and what I could find, it kept saying he wrote Small Soldiers, but it was Small Soldiers, the junior novelization. So I guess like
yeah.
And then he wrote an Emmy Award-winning series, Mists of Avalon. If anyone's heard of that.
Ah, cool. I have not, but add that all to the list.
Exciting.
Oh, I forgot to mention the Lawrence of Arabia movie. Name dropped in the We Didn't Start the Fire Billy Joel song. Lawrence of Arabia, British Beatlemania. That's all.
Thank you. Matt's Music Corner.
Matt's Music Corner. Birth Control, Ho Chi Minh, Richard Nixon back again. All right.
That's the next season.
What a great song.
He incorporated a bunch of different.
Richard Nixon versus Ho Chi Minh. For the first time on this show, we're having two warriors who did fight.
Yeah.
Did they find any reason this season to go for the first time ever on Deadliest? It's like something small every episode.
Yeah. We have a guy named Teddy.
All right, we have Gunnery Sergeant on the Teddy side. Speaking of, Gunnery Sergeant Quay Terry, kind of a cool name, says retired U.S. Marine Corps. Research appears to be a military advisor and armorer in Hollywood, so I just assumed he's legit.
Mm-hmm. Semper Fi, Lucas.
Semper Fi, do or die.
We have a retired military advisor. Well, a retired Marine at least.
Yeah.
Yep. You could be probably military advisor.
I could advise you on anything. I don't know if it's true or
You
not.
advised the show, dude.
Right. Next, we have Gary Harper, who's billed as a military historian, armorer, who weirdly carries on the tradition of experts who look like their warrior. I don't know why that happens so much.
That's the repeating thing this season.
It had to be intentional because he is like wearing the same outfit and like everything.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Honey, I'm gonna represent Teddy, and he's like trimming his mustache down.
Yeah.
He gives us the great quote from Teddy. The best thing you can do in an emergency situation is the right thing. The second best thing you can do is the wrong thing. The worst thing you can do is nothing at all.
Sounds like
I don't know about that.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, that's like the first best thing I could do is buy something at the store. Second best thing I could do is rob the store. Or third is just not go in the store.
Right. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of cases where doing nothing at all is better.
Well,
than
he says
failing.
an emergency situation.
Oh.
So like,
Well, what if I'm out of money? And I need to, should I rob the store then instead of doing nothing?
yeah,
Well, this
the
isn't.
kid needs that medicine.
This is indicative of all the like epic quotes that Teddy Roosevelt gives.
I thought thered be more in
He's
this
known
episode.
for.
There's
I
not.
know.
There's not that many.
It is disappointing.
No
they don't
mention of
give
the
us
big stick.
Yeah.
So, kind of a disappointment. Research I found on Gary appears to be a weapons expert historian for Hollywood, and his Facebook profile picture is his intro in Deadliest Warrior, where it has his name. So we always love when we see the experts and they're proud of what they did. I think that's cool. But yeah, nothing too juicy. Pretty standard.
Can we mention? I think isn't Teddy Roosevelt played by what the hell? Who's the guy that makes all those? Dave Baker.
I do have an announcement to make. If we come over to my screen, I did make my first Rough Rider.
Yes.
Who else but America?
Hell yeah. Let's go.
I won't.
And it is a core.
Nice. Rough Rider Corps.
I'm going to get started on another one.
It doesn't Gary Harper play Teddy Roosevelt in this episode? I thought, why do I feel like that's
It's definitely a different guy.
why is that a piece of trivia that I feel like? But we do know, Craig, you did discover one of the Rough Riders is played.
Well, let's
okay.
save it. Let's save it.
Okay.
Big reveal.
All right.
Lucas is verifying.
I was
That's
trying. It's unverified.
unverified.
Lucas has to comb through all his pictures of Sniper Wolf in order to get to
SS.
Well, let's move on, shall we? We got long range. Took us a lot less time to get here than the last thing we recorded.
Yeah.
So long range, we have the Gatling gun. Barrel length of 30 inches, rate of fire 900 rounds per minute, muzzle velocity of 2020, so that's perfect, FPS. Range of 500 to 2,000 yards, which it's kind of, I mean, I wouldn't want to get shot at 2,000 yards by a Gatling gun, but that's 20 football fields.
It's such a far range of distance too. It's really funny. It's like
The Dragunov is less than 2,000, I think.
Shouldn't there be some variable to these rounds per minute also? Like 900 if you're swole, like 500 if you're average build.
Also, 500 to 2,000 is a pretty big.
It's such a huge jump. Yeah, it's so odd. Like, it's like, what kind of stat is that? It's useless.
Yeah.
Like, well, it could hit out to 500, or you could go all the way out to 2,000.
Right.
What about 1,000?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it falls in there.
If it's catching a wind. So it was invented by a Richard Gatling, which sounds like it's a joke, but it's not. like your kid asks you who invented the Gatling gun. Richard Gatling. But apparently it's
Gatling.
early.
There's a lot of guns that are named after just the guy that made it, like
Yeah.
the AK or the BAR.
Yeah, old
stuff
Dick
like that.
Gatling.
There's a funny Eric Andre bit where they're talking about who invented the ladder.
Oh, the Craig Jorgensen is named after the guy that invented it.
Yeah.
I'm serious. So
Congratulations on your invention.
Thank you. But the Hannibal, he's talking about who invented the ladder, and Hannibal's like, invented by Thomas Ladder. It's funny. Look it up. Okay. So was this gun really made by a doctor? Let's ask Mike.
Yeah, so it was made by Richard Gatling. He actually never practiced medicine. What's interesting about him is he kind of immediately went into like agriculture, making agricultural devices. I believe in the show they talk about how it was made to. It's based off of his automatic seed rolling device. Is like a similar technology, I guess, with the cranking, and he just kind of used that for the Gatling gun. The whole idea of the Gatling gun is there's so many men going out to war. If we can make a weapon that does the job of multiple men, we won't need to send as many boys to go out to war. Similar thing that Eli Whitney tried to do with another one of his inventions. If we make an invention to make it simpler, we don't need as many. But it turns out we're still going to use just as many men. Yeah, it was one thing is interesting researching the Gatling gun. It was very early on, like the modern Gatling gun and the Gatling gun we've seen in the show. The only real huge difference is the fact that there's a motor in the modern Gatling gun on a very basic level. The very early on in the life of the Gatling gun, they tried to attach an electric motor like in the 1800s. The only issue they were having was feeding ammunition to it, so they just scrapped that idea and just kept the crank. It's chambered throughout its service life. It was chambered in 42 caliber, 45-70 government, 30 caliber, and 30-06. In the Spanish-American War, it eventually, at least the Navy and the Marines, replaced it with the M1895 Colt Browning machine gun, and then eventually the Army replaced it with the Vickers machine gun. It had a service life throughout the Civil War to the our involvement in the Philippines. So as far as military weapons, a 40-year lifespan, that's pretty solid. Not as good as the M2, which is over 100 years. But yeah, it's a solid weapon, but it's not as good as the Vickers. And we'll get into it. I think one thing to note is the fact that it's 170 pounds. Yeah. And for reference, the M2 machine gun that shoots the 50 cal is 84.
Wow.
So in terms of crew serve weapons, crew serve being multiple soldiers need to operate this at a time, or multiple people have to operate it. An M2 that can shoot a 50 cal round that is considered anti-material, 84 pounds, whereas the Gatling gun that only got up to like a 30-06, or I guess the 45-70 is bigger, 170 pounds, and needed to be taken around on wheels. It's a cumbersome monster of a weapon to go on the battlefield with, and it's interesting that it lost to beat the Vickers rather, but we'll get into that. It somehow being a superior weapon.
Mike, how are you doing with the spring forward time difference? You adjusting pretty well, or?
What do you mean?
We lost an hour.
Yeah, we lost an hour last night. How you feel?
Oh, I
doing well.
Yeah, I think I'm doing good.
All right, cool. Just checking. Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mike, on the Gatling gun.
I think what Mike forgot to mention, though, is that the Vickers has 1 barrel and the Gatling has 10.
You got to clean all of them.
Clean every single one.
It does look cooler, which I think, honestly, is a legitimate factor.
In Deadliest Warrior, yes.
Can you imagine, like, slapping, like, an 1800s motor on it? There's, like, this big steam engine that's, like, 800 pounds trying to...
You're dumping water into it.
Shoveling coal instead of cranking it.
Somebody's got to piss in the tube.
Yeah. Yeah, no one pisses on this gun.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Maybe for fun.
Stupid.
Maybe for fun.
I'd rather have a gun I could piss in.
You don't have a Vickers to piss in. That's what they used to say when it was funky. Okay.
You don't have a Vickers to piss in.
Okay, so the test. Jeff does say,
On 3, 2, 1, crank 'em out.
Crank them out. And I'm upset. In the Joan episode, we get the steel crossbow and we get the line from Dorian. I'm seeing a lot of fatigue in this cranking motion.
Right, but this, you don't hear it at all here.
We don't get, well, you're being serious. I'm doing it as like the joke. You know, we don't get the...
there's a major fatigue factor in this cranking motion.
Yeah.
Are you not taking this serious?
Oh, I'm serious. Okay. I'll
I'm more serious than all of you.
I feel like we're having the doubleheader loopies.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Those are some of
sure.
the best episodes.
Yeah, the doubleheaders. Okay. So the test. Pretty fun test. I noted that the Gatling gun sounds like the lift hill of the Phantom's Revenge.
Nice.
Kind of a fun noise.
Roller coaster.
Oh, we did know, Brennan and I actually discovered this right before like we filmed during the Gatling gun test. So you have the foam targets that are on the tack bots that are meant to simulate a charging opponent. So we see a lot of bullet holes hit those targets, okay? And we see the round go in and we see the blood spurt or whatever. There are paper targets in the back. I guess they have like some foam wrap around them, but they're just like silhouette targets. And at one point they show one of these silhouette targets in a single frame and they put clip art CGI bullet holes. They're all the same bullet hole. They put 1, 2, 3. I think it was at like 12:36 in the episode. You could pause it on that frame and there's 3 identical clip art bullet holes. And once I pointed it out, you guys were like, every time they showed it, it's like, there it is, there it is. They show it like 4 times. Like,
I will put at full speed a few times. Then I'll do at least one very slow motion. I think it's clear.
yeah, it's clear as day. I don't know why they thought that looked good or why they felt the need to show it more than once.
They probably didn't hit all the targets that they claimed to.
Yep.
They don't address the fact that like the Gatling gun is on like a cannon frame and you have to turn it like it's, I don't know, it's not as easy to turn as they make it look.
Yeah, and like the Vickers, when he shoots the Vickers, you can see him. They even have a wide angle shot, which you never get on Deadliest Warrior, where he's on the gun going like this, and you see the bullets hitting the ground down there, and you see it ripping through targets, actually. Yeah. And I do wonder if they needed, you know, because our working theory with season 3 is that there is no sim and that everything is doctored right from the start.
Everything is written by like writers.
Whereas season 1 and season 2, our working theory is that most of the stuff is rigged. But season 3, I think it's just any pretense of anything is like completely taken out. And I think they needed the Gatling gun to do well and to be the crutch that this whole episode rides on. Because it's like the star of the show, because it's cool. It is cooler than the Vickers, in my opinion, which matters for the show because they want this to be the one you remember, and I always did. So, the fact that you're cranking it out, who knows what the fuck you're hitting with that thing? Like, I know you're picturing like a machine gun where you can just strafe across and it's like you can't miss. But like you said, Lucas, how do you like turn that Gatling gun to like aim? It just seems like the one guy is cranking like this and the other guy's feeding the ammo in. Like,
also
it feels like it would be a very stiff operation. I'm sure you have like some window of movement before you have to move like the wheels and like maybe a little bit up and down.
Yeah.
But yeah, with some guy like feeding the ammo in for you, and like you can't have that big of a window at that thing. I bet it's a little more like stiff than it looks.
You could actually pick and choose your shots with the Vickers.
Yeah.
You can actually aim. Like,
also, I will say, I don't know if you can count this against the Gatling gun necessarily, but I'm sure that the Gatling gun they use is extremely well maintained.
Oh yeah, like both of the guns they bring on look like brand new, like
yeah, and you don't want like a shitty, because they do say, Max does say, at least in the old sim, that they're assuming all weapons are clean and whatever, but like for how easy he cranks it and how easy he turns it, I would bet that in a practical version 200 years ago or whatever was not that smooth.
Probably.
It wasn't as well
maybe
maintained.
not, yeah.
So, but like I said, you can't really add.
But it's got 10
Fatigue
barrels.
factor. It does have 10 barrels.
Can take one out. I will give a shout out to Richard Gatling. I've been playing Fallout New Vegas recently, and I wouldn't be able to clear out Quarry Junction of all the Death Claws without you, buddy. So shout out.
I like Fallout 3 better.
He had you in mind when he made it.
Yeah, he was like, someday Matt's going to need the minigun for this section. So. All right, go on, Craig. Sorry.
That's okay. It's fucking Matt's video game corner over here. Okay. Going down to not to be silly. I wrote autocorrected to Cockers, and then I went to correct it and I wrote Cockers again instead of Vickers. For some reason, at least in Google Docs, when you write Vickers, it autocorrects to Cockers, which I've never written before in my life. So
Craig's telling on himself a little bit with the algorithm.
I got news for you. Okay.
What's all this porn that keeps popping up on my Insta page?
Are you just used to typing in Cockers all the time or something?
Let's get them Vickers stats here,
Okay.
Craig.
Yeah, we got to keep it moving.
Yeah.
Stats. Barrel length of 26.5 inches, or 26.5. So, I guess half. Never mind. Rate of fire, 450 to 500 rounds per minute. Muzzle velocity 2,440 FPS in a range of 2,187. I'm going to assume that's yards. For some reason, we get a specific muzzle. We get a specific range, but a very generic range for the Gatling. That's suspicious. Although it is more than the.
I'll say for rate of fire, 450 to 500. I feel like it makes sense to have a range like that. It's the 500 to 2,000 that's like a weird, it tells you nothing. There's nothing you're learning from that range.
Yeah, so that's a little bit odd. I mean, you think, because we talked about in the last episode we filmed how this season they're using more specific numbers, because I assume they're doing the test and that's what we're getting, not just an approximation.
Yeah.
So why is there such a wide range for the range of the Gatling? I don't know.
The only thing I could think of, which still doesn't make sense thinking about it, is if the first number is the combat effective range and the second number is the max range for the. But
that would be interesting, but of course they don't apply that to everything.
no, but those old bullets probably weren't even combat effective out to 500.
Yeah, but can you talk about Richard discussing the cooling tank there, Craig?
I will. I'll say this, that also no mention of the weight, which is probably the biggest factor. So really a lot of these stats that are presented are stacking in favor of the fucking Gatling.
Yeah.
Because weight should have been for sure
Massive,
one of the things.
yeah.
That's such
Massive consideration.
Right, exactly. Just to kind of prompt us, we'll get to the P. Isn't this the gun from Battlefield 1, and did they really pee on the gun?
Yes, every time I tried looking this up, that's all I could find was the Lawrence of Arabia Battlefield 1 pack where you unlock this gun. It was so but yeah, so I tried to look up if he actually had access to these in real life. Best I could find is I assume so, but he probably would have used Lewis guns just because they were more portable given his style of warfare, which was more guerrilla almost in fashion. So this is a water-cooled machine gun produced by Vickers for Vickers Limited for the British Army. It weighed about 30 pounds empty and 40 pounds with water or pee and ammo. It fired the 303 British and was operated by a 3-man crew, but typically required more to move and operate. Once fired, it fed. One fired, one fed, and one helped the others carry the ammo and spare parts. It came with interchangeable barrels usually, which is very common for any machine gun, even to this day.
Yeah.
It was in service from 1912 to 1968, so it saw pretty much both world wars. I look up the urine thing, and I guess that was actually true.
Yeah, I wonder how often that actually happens.
I doubt it was that often, but here's something I found that was weirder instead. So there was also a rumor going around that the British people would pour water in the reservoir, fire off a couple rounds, and make tea with it. But it tasted slightly of machine oil. But when they were in the field, that was a quick way of warming up water for tea.
We need to have tea time.
I do have an announcement. I'm declaring war on one of the Spanishes. So
nice.
the
Let's
Rough
go,
Riders are
baby.
going in.
Love that, Mike. Thank you for
Hey,
sharing.
Spanish are never going to recover from this.
Now, there is a elephant in the room, 800-pound gorilla in the room, whatever euphemism you want to use. The Vickers had a great reputation for solidity and reliability. And on August 1916, when the British 100th Company of the Machine Gun Corps fired 10 Vickers, they delivered sustained fire for 12 hours using 100 barrels and fired over 1 million rounds without any jams or breakdowns. This was considered a foolproof reliability test. This was also the machine gun that was mounted onto the Vickers EFB-1 biplane, although that would eventually change to the Lewis gun. But for a short period of time, interesting here, was also adopted by the United States after unanimous approval, and Colt manufactured 4,125 of them, chambered in 30-06. During World War II, small quantities of the gun were rechambered in 7.62 millimeter NATO. So, but overall, if this gun is literally known for one thing, it had a very notorious reputation for being battle proven and effective in combat and being reliable and pretty much like breakdown and jam proof.
Wow.
It was eventually replaced by the FN MAG though.
Also, can I mention a lot of times when you see like, Snoopy versus the Red Baron and he's flying the little biplane, Snoopy doesn't have a gun, but those British biplanes and the German biplanes had the little machine guns on them.
Vickers?
It's either a Maxim or a Vickers gun usually. So that's
Cool.
That's what Snoopy's putting holes in the other local Beagles with the Vickers.
Vickers is a cool gun.
It is a cool gun, yeah.
Not as cool as the Gatling, but you can see why this was chosen as the first weapon, because usually that's the one that they want to lead with is the juiciest.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's sort of a good segue, Lucas. So in the test, same one as the Gatling, the gun immediately jams. Jeff yells, "Someone needs to piss in the tube."
Somebody needs to piss in the tube.
You know, it's funny. You said that you couldn't 100% verify that peeing thing. What if the dude just made that up? How funny would that be?
On the spot.
He's like, that's what I do with mine.
He leans into Gavin and he's like, whatever I say, just go with it. All right? We're going to see what we can get these people to believe.
When you see this jam, it is the fakest looking jam to me. They feed the belt through. He just stops firing and they just pull on the belt a little bit. And then he pulls back and ejects 2 live rounds.
Yeah.
Like that cleared the jam somehow. All it did is feed the belt through continually, and then they go back to firing. That is the most fabricated jam I've ever seen.
They play a couple fake sound effects.
Yeah,
It's like,
Yeah. Mike, do you want to tell us what you had to say about that jam? That was insightful.
Oh yeah, I saw the jam happen. I'm like, well, the episode has been decided at this point. That in my opinion, that was the deciding factor for the entire episode.
that's the single funniest observation about this episode is that
That's the second that happens.
it is true. If you watch this show enough, obviously we do, the second that moment happens and the Vickers jams, you're like, oh, well, Lawrence is getting fucked.
Yeah.
Teddy's going to win.
The gun that literally has a reputation for never jamming jams. You go, well, the American's winning.
Yep.
Is it jammed twice or just that one time?
Just one, but they take 30 seconds to clear it out. And then he clears 2 live rounds. He feeds 2 rounds through it for some reason before he starts firing again. And it's just a selling point for the
Just to be clear for those of you watching at home.
grievance relievance.
For some of you who might be tuning into this episode for the first time, there are multiple examples throughout all seasons of Deadliest Warrior of these jams or weapons being unreliable. We get blunderbuss and flintlocks in the pirate episode. We get...
Isn't there one in the French Musketeer one too?
So we get the IRA versus Taliban episode where we get a fake AR-15 covered in mud, and we get the guns jammed. We got Somali Pirate versus Medellin Cartel with the M60 and the PKM where both jam, but one jams twice. And the matchlock pistol was one. But I think we determined that gun was actually malfunction.
I kind of look like shit. But
I am going to say this. We have discovered from video evidence, from combing through this shit nonstop, that those tests are always fake. They're always filmed very manipulatively, and they insert fake sound effects. I have no doubt this is staged as well to fit some kind of narrative of the episode. But I'm going to say this. If it's not faked, that is on the fucking show.
Right.
Okay. Even in the world where this is not fake and that Vickers jammed like 2 shots in, that is on the show. The Vickers and the Team Lawrence should not be fucking penalized for your equipment failing in a controlled environment. This is not an Allied trench, okay? There is not dirt and grime and rain coming down. They haven't been out there for months, okay? This is clean. It just got brought to set. How is your gun jamming? They don't just do that. You know, guns don't, even guns that are prone to jamming, don't just do that on the fucking range. And if they do, that's your fault, and you shouldn't count that as like towards the test.
I was even gonna say with the jams just in the history of the show, I feel like it is gonna be on the armor, like because normally if something would jam and you're trying to get scientific data, like that's the point of the show, you would say, oh, let's redo that because that's unexpected jam. But in this, it's treated like the fault of the weapon. So it's almost like these have to be scripted because otherwise, don't blame the weapon. Like,
right. Yeah.
I don't know.
How come the gun's jamming on your controlled set?
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? Like, then just edit that part out and shoot it again.
And I think this is one of the fakest jams yet, though, where they just stop firing and then like yank on the belt a couple times or something.
And you can understand why they do it too, because
the edge. Yeah.
as we go through this episode, you'll see Lawrence of Arabia basically gets the edge across the board in every single category except for the machine gun, and Teddy gets 1 X factor. Okay. However, we'll see by the results that the machine gun apparently was the most important thing in the whole damn episode. So they need this to go Teddy's way so that he can win and they can have a justification for it. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fucking Gatling gun when we get to the Battle of San Juan Heights. So
let's get into the test real quick. I mean, we've kind of covered, we didn't get to the result of the test. So Jeff notes that the shape of the bolt is particularly damaging. I think when like the shrapnel or whatever digs in. He hits 3 out of 3 moving targets and 11 out of 15 for the static.
So I wrote, to test the weapons, each team fires 250 rounds at 15 static targets and 3 advancing soldiers as quickly as possible. They test for speed, hit ratio, and lethality. The Gatling gun manages to score 13 of 18 hits in 1 minute 11 seconds. The Vickers delivers 14 out of 18 hits in 1 minute 41 seconds. The delay, that 30 extra seconds, obviously coming from the jam that the gun experiences.
Okay, I think I forgot to mention that with the Gatling. So with the Gatling, I'll say this, that Mac mentions the psychological X factor that they have to plug into the sim of seeing your team get mowed down.
I'm so tired of hearing that now in this season.
And this is the other thing too with the Gatling, and I guess to an extent the Vickers, is the entire army getting mowed down, or is it just a team of 5?
Yeah.
So it's a lot different of a story if there's just walls of people getting cut up, or it's 5 people, and
so also this first comes up in like the Washington Napoleon episode, and they bring it up in the context that like you're standing there and you watch your teammate get like blown in half by a cannonball, right? And the context they're talking about in that particular situation is, imagine you are a Norman knight from like 1012 or whatever, fighting for William the Conqueror. You're charging into battle and you see you just hear this boom and you see the guy next to you, his fucking, from the shoulders up, he's just gone. That is a psychological factor, because you would be like, oh my God, we're going to lose. But in this instance, both warriors have firearms. I've never been shot at. That's a life goal of mine. I hope to continue that. Wouldn't it be equally as scary to be shot at by both of these things? Like, especially if guys are getting shot around you. Like, is there any particular difference that like between a guy getting shot by a Gatling gun and then a guy getting shot by the Vickers? Aren't you going to be equally horrified by both events? Like, right. You're not going to be like, holy shit, he's dead, but at least it's not a Gatling gun. You know, it would have been even worse.
Then I'd be terrified.
Did you know the Gatling was made by a doctor?
Surgical
Ironic.
precision.
Right. So that goes the Gatling gun. That's zero surprise. We've kind of covered everyone's thoughts on it. Why don't we move on to medium range?
Yeah.
Sure.
So we got the short magazine Lee Enfield rifle, which stands for the SMLE.
Schmelly.
The SMLE.
Mike, I always think of like Doflamingo with the smile.
What?
I'm sorry?
I'm in the middle of.
Mike got distracted by his Civ game.
I was saying, we're talking about the SMLE, and I said I would always think of Doflamingo with the smile.
Yeah. That's two back to back. We had William O. Darby, DARB.
Yeah,
And
back to
then-
back. This is Mike and Craig's anime corner. Okay. Okay. All right, let's go. So stats: barrel length of 25 inches, 8.8 pounds, and the feed system of a 10-round mag. Is this different than a regular Lee Enfield?
I heard you like it.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. I just want to add, Lucas, before you go into it, because it's incredibly frustrating. We had this problem on the Ranger North Korean episode. They don't mention what fucking bullet these guns fire.
Right.
The bullet is so important to like what a rifle does. So the SMLE fires the 303 British round, and the Craig Jorgensen, which we'll get to in a minute, fires the 3040 Craig round. So sorry, Lucas, go ahead.
This was the one when you Google it, you get the Lords of Arabia SMLE pack for Battlefield 1, where it's Lords of Arabia.
British Beatlemania.
It autocorrected it. Yeah, but this was the Battlefield gun that you get like immediately too. What was your original question?
How is this different than a regular Lee Enfield?
Because it's a short magazine one.
Oh, that's it.
These have a shorter barrel too, right?
The answer is not really.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of different marks.
Like no, 25. Yeah,
Yeah.
It doesn't have a. So, did Lawrence actually use this? At the King George V War Museum, there is an SMLE Mark III that was used at Gallipoli, captured by the Turks. Enver Pasha of Turkey presented it to Amir Faisal, who presented it to Lawrence. He notably used it for the rest of the war and later presented it to King George V, which is how it ended up in the War Museum. So this thing is just a slightly shorter. I wrote slightly shorter. I'm not 100% sure if it's slightly shorter barrel-wise than the Lee Enfield, but it is a lighter version, and it has the nickname The Smelly. It was introduced January 1st, 1904, and it has the visual trademark of its blunt nose. The SMLE Mark III, which is the best-known model, was introduced January 26, 1907, with a pattern 1907 bayonet. Although I didn't see that it was used that heavily during the First World War due to manufacturing difficulties. It was more prevalent during the Second World War. But it is actually still in service today, according to Wikipedia, and is the second longest serving military bolt-action rifle behind what?
Is it the Springfield 03A3?
No, it's actually the Mosin.
Oh, the Mosin Nagant,
Yeah.
yes, because the Russians still have to use that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Lee Enfield itself was the standard issue rifle to companies in the British Army, and over 17 million of these guns have been made in different variations, and this is just essentially a variation of the Lee Enfield.
Yeah, I wrote in here, I'm glad you looked up that it's a Mark III, because I had to assume it was a Mark III because they don't state, but he says this has been in service for 50 years, so I was like, that has to be.
Yeah, the one that they have in the museum that was supposedly owned by Lawrence, that was given to him as a gift, was a Mark III.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm not 100% sure if there's a difference in the barrel length between like the different Mark versions or the different. There's so many variations of the Lee Enfield, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it was the service weapon of the British Empire for like ever. So there was a whole lot of different models made, and they were made by different countries. And I don't know if you wrote at all about this, Lucas, but Richard talking about the rapid fire capabilities of the Lee Enfield.
Take it if you have it.
Yeah, I took some notes. So he mentions that you could fire this weapon really fast, and that is actually the Lee Enfield is known for being
Because it has that real smooth bolt. I know they talk about that.
So they mentioned that the Craig has a smooth bolt. But the Lee Enfield is actually known for having one of the smoothest actions ever made. And you guys can laugh here, but this is not super common with a lot of bolt actions, but the Lee Enfield cocks on closed, okay? And because of that, the British Army actually had a famous drill called the Mad Minute, where a soldier would see how many rounds they could shoot in a minute. And what they would do is they would get down and they'd have to stay stationary, and they'd have to work the bolt with the palm of their hand rather than gripping it with the fingers. So you'd have to like work it like this and shoot. And depending on what grade marksman you were, you either got a bigger target to shoot at or a smaller one. But it was all to see how many rounds you could fire. You can look up the current records and like the records from like World War II era.
It says average on here because I looked it up, 20 to 30 aim shots per minute.
Yeah, because remember, they're shooting at the target, so they're only counting the hits if it's hitting the target. And that's what's important, is that this rifle was accurate enough and fast enough that you could boom, 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 deliver a ton of shots on target. And having a 10-round magazine capacity too is pretty big, because that's more rounds than a lot of these service bolt actions held at that time.
Yeah, most were like 5. The barrel length, the MLE variant is 30.2. The SMLE Mark III is 25.2 for barrel length.
Okay.
So it might have had a slightly shorter barrel, but there was also a rifle number 5 Mark I. No idea what that is. That had 18, so there was a short barrel variant. There is a lot of different technical data here.
There's a million. We talked about the AK in the last episode we recorded. There is that many variants of the Lee Enfield. It's ridiculous. So, Mike, you were trying to say something?
Yeah, another thing with the bolt pull, the unique thing about the reason like people are able to do like the Mad Minute with the SMLE and what makes it so special is that like Lee Enfield bolt, it's just shorter pull, so you can keep your face on the sights. You're able to cycle the bolt without moving your face. You would need a rifle with a Mauser style bolt, which the Krag has a Mauser style bolt. Same with the Springfield and Mosin Nagant. The bolt comes back so far where you have to move your face off the sights, whereas an Enfield, you can keep your face on the sights. And they actually, I don't think they do in the show. There's a unique way of shooting the Enfield where you're actually your hands over the bolt and you have your middle finger is sticking through the trigger.
That's what I was talking about, where you're palming the bolt and like firing as quick as you can.
Ow.
Right. Yeah.
My bolt's too long.
So I thought it was cool that they had it on here.
You know what's really cool? That they're about to fire these rounds into some FBI certified ballistics clay.
Just to give some hard evidence for our audience here. I always joke about how these rifles are always shot from like 75 feet, and they do it's 75 yards, and they do it again in this fucking episode. I want you to know that the British Army, every soldier in the British Army did the Mad Minute drill, and they shot it in prone from 300 yards. So this is what I mean when I'm saying like these 75-yard shots with a rifle
are nothing.
Like it doesn't tell you anything about a rifle's capabilities. All it's telling you about is the operator. Like,
even whenever I fired in the military, given it's AR with a lot of times we had the ROC, which had like a binder, like 3 times zoom. We would fire from 200 yards, 300 and 500. The 200 and even the 300 for the most part were kind of just gimmies.
Oh, with an AR, it's super easy. Yeah. So yeah, that's what I had to say about those. Some notes about the Lee Enfield.
What was I'll save force on your AR, Lucas?
The what?
The recoil force. Did you guys get that measured?
9.
Okay.
Yeah, Craig. I think we're good on the Lee Enfield. If you want to move forward here on the test or anything.
Well, we got to get to the Krag.
Yes, the Krag.
Yeah.
Wait,
so
who set this rifle here? Oh, Craig, are you going to move on to the next topic?
Thinking about that the whole episode, that gag. So I wish I really knew what this looked like in real life, but this is the Krag carbine. Stats are about like 22 inches, if you can imagine that. Weight about like 7.75 pounds. Feed system of 5-round magazine. Does this gun have the smoothest bolt ever?
Hell yeah. So let me talk about this Craig here for a second. The announcer in classic fashion, it gave me a good laugh when he said the Crag, because it reminded me of the Ninjato line where they just gave him the line on paper and no one bothered to tell him how it was pronounced. The Ninjato. So the Craig Jorgensen, pretty popular rifle. As Lucas mentioned, it's a variant of a Mauser rifle. So right here, we do not have a carbine. This is a full length Craig Jorgensen rifle. And this is actually from my dad's collection. So I haven't mentioned it on here really before, but my dad is a bit of a connoisseur and a collector of these old bolt action service rifles. And the reason he gets into them, besides the fact that he likes them, is because for like 15 plus years now, my dad and I have been going out to Camp Perry, Ohio for the competitive service rifle matches. We shoot pretty recreationally, you know, occasionally we get like a little bronze medal here or there, like in the grouping, but
the service bronze medal?
No, not the third overall, but like in a certain point group. And actually, how not to go on for too long, but I have right here the booklet for the 2019 match results from Camp Perry. Lucas came out with my dad and I and our group of guys, and we shot the Teddy Roosevelt commemorative match, which you can compete with a 1903 Springfield or a Craig Jorgensen. And so we competed, Lucas and I competed, and my dad, with this very rifle. And even more fun fact, if you go out to Camp Perry at all, if you were out there in 2019, me, Lucas, and my dad are on the cover.
Yeah.
You can't see our faces really, but you can see Lucas.
You can kind of see the side of mine.
This is during the Garand matches, this picture. If you have this booklet, this is for the one person out there.
Yeah.
My dad has a white bucket hat with red text on it. It stands out. It's right in center frame.
I'm probably wearing a coyote hat.
Lucas is right in front of him in jeans and a hat, and you're actually looking back at me, and I am sitting in a chair directly behind you. I'm actually a little farther back than the other chairs, and that's because I'm spotting and scoring for you at that point in time. So this is the Grand match, but we shot the Roosevelt match. You can actually see our scores in here. Let me tell you, we lit it up.
Yeah, Matt's back there in his chair. Miss.
Right.
Miss.
No joke. My dad actually medaled with the Craig. And I do remember, so just to speak for some personal experience, I have shot a multitude of these old bolt action service rifles from my dad's collection going out there. Like I've done the Arsaka, the KS-31, the Swedish Mauser, and we were remarking on how nice it is to shoot the Craig.
Compared to like a Mosin that blows your arm off.
Compared to the Mosin, it's beautiful. And I'll just add, my dad still goes out there, and when he does the vintage bolt match, he has several guns to choose from, and he actually chooses to use the Craig Jorgensen because of how nice it is. So there is something to the fact that it's a really nice shooting weapon. I'm not really going to work the bolt too much, but it's pretty nice. It's unique, and the most iconic thing about it is it's got this little feed system on the side. It's a little trap door that opens up. And all you got to do is you take the 5 rounds loose and you dump them in there. And as long as they're all facing forward, you close this up. And the rifle, the bullets actually cycle underneath the bolt. It's very unique. No other like bolt action rifle really works like that. So very nice gun to shoot. It's held up considering it was made in 1896. Yeah, so those are my notes on that. I've never really competed with a Lee Enfield out at Perry. The only Lee Enfield I've ever shot actually was Mike's. You have a Mark V jungle carbine.
Yeah, which kind of, it's interesting. It kind of looks like the Craig carbine, just in terms of like the exposed front barrel and just the overall feel of it. Not that I've manhandled Matt's dad's Craig, but just from looking at it, it looks similar.
My dad's huge rifle.
Fuck'd you phrase it like that, Mike?
Listen, the man's playing a Teddy run on Civ. Yeah. I have competed out at Perry though with like the 7.5 Arasaka round, which is a very similar round to the British 303.
Which that's the Japanese World War II.
Japanese. There's two different Arasakas. One of them's the 7.5, very similar to the British 303 round, and I'm not going to hold it against the Lee Enfield.
That thing is cool.
Probably a lot better experience than the Arasaka.
The Arasaka has the anti-aircraft sights on it. So you're holding it and you flip up this tree, then you flip out these things.
Oh, yeah.
Your sights are like this giant
Yeah, that's on all of these old rifles, like those.
Doesn't that one have like the
sights.
side fold outs for lead?
It has specifically anti-aircraft.
Yeah, that's
sights,
hilarious.
which is really funny to think about.
Season 4. Deadliest
So I'll let Craig talk about the test, but I really enjoyed this test. It's totally flawed, and as usual with Deadliest Warrior, it doesn't really tell you anything remotely valid about what these rifles do.
fake science.
Yeah, it is fake science, but I did enjoy. I like my dad, so I didn't put him through this whole episode. But we did watch this segment together when he came over, and so I have a nice personal memory about it. You know, good stuff. So he assumed the SMLE would get the edge, as did I. So right, yes.
Okay, well, let's get on to the test here. So we got a head-to-head test, which, as we've said, big fans of. And a little less exciting in terms of, I don't even know why I wrote that.
Like,
But more
'cause
precise.
it's not a
head-to-head.
It's not a Vickers, you know. Like,
Yeah. More precise. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. Jeff's lab tests the recoil on the carbines, and we see a little Minecraft character demonstration of what recoil is. He sets up a chronometer shooting into ballistics clay as well as
FBI ballistics clay, Craig.
Sorry.
They definitely didn't just get like Play-Doh from Dollar General.
Did you see which crew member do you think would eat the Play-Doh? Sippy back there just. Chronometer test the shooting ballistics clay, FBI ballistics clay, as well as a contraption to test the recoil. Muzzle velocity of the Krag is 1958 FPS and the SMLE is 2592 FPS.
I have something to put in right here. When they announced the muzzle velocities of these rifles, they re-recorded the audio, and there's a you hear it, there's a very blatant. He goes, and the muzzle velocity of the SMLE is 2,592.
Muzzle velocity. Off the SMLE, we got 2,592 feet per second.
It's like
he like yells it. I did notice that.
Yeah, it must have been like completely different mic or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
It's
check it.
kind of funny. Yeah, it's like jarring.
I like little stuff like that.
They had to re-record it. Jeff's Fabrication Lab.
I mean, I guess they want to do maybe to make this show seem more scientific, but
It's two uncommon rounds,
So they're
it's not a bad idea.
They're testing muzzle velocity, temporary cavity, and the recoil of the guns.
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say that normally the muzzle velocity is just something you get on the stats screen, like they've already done this test.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you get all three. So yeah, as you mentioned, the muzzle velocity of the Krag is 1958 FPS, SMLE 2592.
2,592.
Yes. Temporary cavity of the Krag is 5 inches, which is plenty.
Yes, actually, 5 inches like average.
Maybe like a little above, depending on what country you're talking about.
Yeah,
A little bit above.
I
so
agree. That's plenty long.
it's plenty.
That's just because you don't got the extra 0.5.
It's you versus the temporary cavity she tells you not to worry about.
And then we got the SMLE,
Which
is 5.5.
AKA the max size of the block. Like they couldn't get a little bit bigger one.
And also, how dumb is this test in that, like, so the Krag doesn't hit on target, but at least it hits the block mostly and you can get the temporary cavity. The SMLE, like, Richard fucking misses. Like, he shoots through, like, I feel like the gun
I think he hits the bottom or something.
So the gun is shooting low. And when you watch, even in the dynamic test, most of Richard's shots hit off like the sandbags and stuff. And that is either that gun is sighted in to shoot out to a farther distance maybe, and no one told Richard that, or shooting low is a sign of recoil flinching. So a lot of like new shooters, or if you're shooting a gun for the first time, a lot of your shots will go lower because you're anticipating the shot, because you're waiting for that recoil. So you hammer the trigger and the gun, like the bullet goes low. So I don't know what it was, but Richard shoots this, it hits the bottom of the fucking table and then goes up into the clay and like chops it in half. And because I guess in the most Deadliest Warrior thing ever, they don't have a second block of clay in case something went wrong. They were like, well, let's just go with it, 5.5 inches.
You take that as like dollar store see-through clear roller.
Very
He
scientific.
took it out of his daughter's pencil case.
I don't even know how he measures that SMLE, because like,
Yeah.
It's just,
like, oh,
he
he's
just
like,
says
oh,
it's the
500.
whole length. He measures the length of the block.
Yeah,
He's like, that's.
He's
the
like, we're
cavity.
looking at full length of the block, 5.5 inches.
right. Then we get recoil, Crag 9 pounds, SMLE 37 pounds.
That is incorrect science.
But the British guy says, well, Lawrence was so fit, the recoil doesn't even matter at all.
Right.
Well, let me tell you what's the real fact here. Lawrence was a masochist, and he wants more recoil.
That's true, yeah.
So I unfortunately do not have a British 303 round. I do have a couple Craig 30-40 rounds here, though. You got this, this funny little shaped one here. This is more like a cowboy round. And then you got the more modern pointed round. And if you want to compare it for anybody that knows about guns, this is a 308 round. This is from the Ranger episode. So this is a modern 308 compared to a 30-40 Craig round. So as you can see, a bit longer, but very similar size bullet, actually. So if you know what a 308 feels like, that'll give you a similar idea.
Yeah, there's not going to be
a little more powder in this.
Yeah, there's not going to be this big of a difference between, though it's still a wooden rifle kicking from similar sized rounds. There's not going to be this big of a difference in recoil. There is no recoil like negotiation or whatever the hell they call it system. There's nothing absorbing recoil except the wood in your shoulder.
The Enfield and the Craig got the same recoil system that all of these rifles did, and that is a steel butt plate.
Yeah.
Because they gave you a steel butt plate because you might have to hit somebody in the fucking head with it. So
like modern rifles have a spring that eats the recoil, so that's why you don't feel it.
Yeah.
These old rifles do not. It's just a block of wood that you feel all of it in your shoulder. That is too big of a difference. It is inaccurate science.
I would definitely think that the Craig has less recoil,
but not that.
But I doubt it's that drastic.
Yeah.
So, Mike,
Can I something for the viewer? I don't know if you want to talk about this. So both of these warriors are mostly mounted on horses, and the Rough Riders, you'd imagine them using lever action weapons. What is the big advantage of a bolt action over a lever action? Like why did we switch over? If you want to
Less mechanical parts,
viewers.
moving parts.
yeah, you have to consider I think the Craig carbine probably just Teddy Roosevelt preferred that gun because he liked that gun, and obviously you're using a shorter carbine version when you're on horseback. My guess as to why bolts became the standard instead of lever action, I imagine the bolt is probably more accurate, and like Lucas was saying, there is less moving parts, so it's easier to mass produce
and less shit to break.
And also, I mean, you can shoot a bolt gun like you were talking about with the Lee Enfield. You can bring it back and forward again, whereas lever action, there's a lot more movement when you're pulling the gun downward. I will admit I don't have that much experience with lever actions. So.
I have a bunch of them, and they're really cool, showy guns, and they're fantastic. I have like a 44 Henry, a 34 or 30 Marlin. It kind of beats your hand up a little bit too, and I don't know, even just that. There's a way more, like when you take them apart, there's way more moving parts inside, and I mean they're fantastic things, but it just makes sense that they got phased out eventually just for simplicity.
Yeah.
Like replacing essentially.
This was the U.S. Army's standard issue at the time, this Craig. So that's why the Rough Riders are using the carbine variant, because
isn't it
they're using the
there's
standard issue,
also,
but the cavalry version.
What's that? Sorry. Isn't
Sorry.
it also something with the tube magazine? Right? I might be
Oh
mistaken.
yeah.
But
Yeah,
the tube magazine, you have to have rounded bullets. You can't have the tipped bullets in a tube magazine, because if you have tipped bullets, you're gonna set off every round in the magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the lever actions have those like tubes you feed them into. That's probably another reason. You see in the dynamic test, Quay has to load 1 round at a time with the Craig with the gun belt, but the SMLE, which is a more technologically advanced gun, has a inner box magazine, which means you can load it with stripper clips, and that allows you to reload a gun a lot faster, and especially faster. That's probably a great point, Mike. The tube feeding, that's going to be, you can never develop really like a mechanism like a stripper clip for a tube feeding that you could for like a bolt action.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's where we are. Craig, you want to talk about the dynamic test a little bit here?
Yeah, so I called this the crazy Nick Gas test, where experts have to run sandbag to sandbag at different ranges, including through a no man's land.
Yeah.
Kind of a lot to describe, but probably one of the most just a dynamic tests that we have on the show.
I like the run and gun.
Yeah, it's interesting. But again,
it does keep things visually interesting.
Like I was talking about with North Korea, is this would make a little more sense if the show was a competition of like, oh, let's see how you do. You're going to be using this guy's weapon, and
if it's testing the man more than it's testing the weapon,
right? But you got to make a good program. So, well, Teddy's first. Jeff notes the reload time heavily affects the test. Whenever he's done, Quay yells "time" at a very unflattering angle. Because he was like, "Time!" And the stats are 16 hits and 20 shots, an 80% kill death ratio, all 8 targets killed, 2 minutes 26 seconds.
Yep.
And I said that bullshit that this was less than 2.5 minutes. Like, there's no way that didn't take more time, but whatever. Mack insinuates that Quay's calm under pressure somehow would factor into how well Roosevelt would perform.
No, because they're the same person.
The calm under fire.
That's definitely going to help Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, they're 2 different people. Again, this was Nick Gas rules. Then that would make total sense, but it's not. So Larry's tests stats: 15 hits and 20 shots, 70% kill death ratio, only 7 out of 8 targets killed though, in 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
He really hucks his body around too.
Oh yeah, so
he throws himself into the ground and
I think the biggest thing you notice during this test is that Quay is a military veteran.
Yes.
Has
is
training.
it any surprise that the U.S. Marine won the competition? Every Marine's a rifleman.
Well, except he didn't.
Yeah, he did. He was the Craig.
Well, it got called even.
Well, he won he got more hits.
Yeah, he did get more hits.
Yeah, he's got the 8 out of 8.
And I do like Dorian going up to the mannequins and being like, well, this one's a lethal hit, but this not. That goes into, again, you get smacked with a 303 round in the stomach, and it's like, well, I mean, he's not going to die instantly. It's like, yeah, but come on, man.
What were you going to say?
No, it's just the operator. Again, the operator of the weapon is really determining which weapon is superior, because it's like the Enfield has a bigger magazine. It's a longer rifle. It's going to be more accurate. Yeah. And yet it loses out to the Krag. And it probably comes down to the fact that the Marine has a lot more marksmanship training, especially since he was a gunnery sergeant. So, that's at least probably a decade, more like 15 years in the Marine Corps of qualing every year.
You can see in the technique where they get into prone how Quay falls back and then rolls into the prone position. Whereas you were mentioning with Richard, he fucking
he tries to copy it and it looks like a fish out of water.
It's like he's trying to go for the speed record on a slip and slide. Like he fucking falls forward. It looks like it fucking hurts.
He knocks himself out. Jeff's like, he's not doing good on time.
Right. He's not doing good on time. Also, one little thing I'd like to mention is the show says Richard uses a 10-round stripper clip, which was really funny. You can imagine like a stripper clip that's like this big. They're 5-rounders. He would use 2 5-round ones to reload the gun. I don't know why they needed to say 10. Just a 10-round stripper clip being like you're walking around with that in your pocket. But yeah, I feel like if Quay had gotten to use the Lee Enfield, I mean, he probably would have performed better in a faster time. The Lee Enfield has 5 rounds in its magazine. The Craig has 10 rounds in its magazine. The Lee Enfield does. The Craig has 5 rounds. And then when you have to reload, the Lee Enfield, you can reload with 2 ready stripper clips in your pocket that you just push down, close the bolt, you're good to go. With the Craig, you either have to get a jumble of loose rounds in your hand and like kind of pour them into that trap door.
Then pick up the one that falls on the ground.
Yeah, or you have to load them one at a time. And the reason he had to do that is because you're not carrying a bunch of loose rounds in your pocket. You have it on a little gun belt thing. And it's probably honestly better instead of fumbling with a handful of cartridges to just reload it quickly. So I think what you're really seeing is that these end up getting called even in the edges. And I think what you're seeing is that the SMLE is a more advanced weapon. It's a superior rifle. But Quay is a superior shooter. And so when he's handling the Craig carbine, he's able to keep pretty good pace. I think the time difference is only it's 11 seconds. Richard beats him by, and who knows if those times are real or not.
Doubt it.
But it's only 11 seconds. So like that is all coming from Quay being able, like having done these kind of drills in his life before, versus Richard. I know they say Richard is a first-class marksman is how they introduce him, which sounds like a fake title, right? Like, and that he's had training. My impression was that Richard was a stunt actor that they brought on. So I don't know. Maybe he's got more experience than that. But they get called even. I guess that's fine, but I feel like the edge should have gone to the SMLE.
Yeah, that's about where I'm at. It's not the end of the world, but
no.
I mean, it's one rounds kind of doesn't even exist anymore. The 30-40 Craig.
Mm-hmm.
The 303, it's kind of an outdated-ish round at this point.
Sure, but it's to me it all comes back to they both have smooth bolts.
Yeah,
and to me it comes down to that it's that magazine. You have twice as many rounds and you can reload it in a fraction of the time versus half as many rounds and it's taking you twice as long to reload it.
Yeah,
I mean, an advantage.
That's what it comes down to, like, my opinion too. What would I take? I mean, I'd rather have. That's one of those things that looks cool and it's like a discussion piece.
Yeah,
and you're like, oh yeah, that's really like. But there's a reason no other gun has that contraption on the side of it.
This is incredibly subjective. But like I mentioned, my dad's choice for the vintage bolt, he has a lot of rifles to choose from. He chooses to take the Craig out with him. When we sat down to watch this episode, my dad was like, oh, well, I imagine the edge is going to go to the SMLE, right? Yeah. And then when we watched like the competition, he was like, yeah, I feel like Quay just, was able to perform, knew a little bit more what he was doing. And he's like, I don't know. I feel like the Lee Enfield probably, is a better like weapon for battle. So I was like, all right, Dad, I'll name drop you on the pods. Shout out, Dad.
You versus the Quay she tells you not to worry about.
So those are my thoughts. I really enjoy it. All that being said, I did really enjoy this segment. I got to nerd out about it a little bit. So
yeah, this was a fun. It was more fun than the last test.
It was better than what they usually do, which is having a guy empty 30 rounds of an M4 into a pig carcass, and then Dorian coming up and being like, "He's dead." It's like,
oh, if we can get him to, he might bleed out.
Right. Thank you, Dorian.
Dorkian.
Well, in the
Come
edge,
on the pod.
as we said, it is even. I noted that I was shocked that it wasn't given to the Crag just because of the test.
Yeah, because of how it performs. Because when you watch the episode, you're like, well, the Crag should definitely get the edge, right? Like,
Yeah. Dorian argues that the shoulder fatigue factor would affect an SMLE user long term. I guess for the rest of their life, or like, what do
he means in the moment. There is recoil fatigue. It just involves like when you're shooting a gun like that and you get bruised on your shoulder, you start feeling it, and so you start anticipating your shots and flinching when you're shooting because it just hurts. I don't know how relevant that is to the sim.
That's why they put it up on top of their shoulder.
Right. I don't know how relevant that is to the sim because they've literally never mentioned it before. And how long is this battle going for? Because I imagine in the heat of combat, like Lawrence of Arabia's fired a rifle plenty of times. Like he's probably not being like, ow.
Yeah, I bet he could lay down like a couple hundred shots before he's like.
Yeah, I mean, that would make more of a difference to me if these were like two guys and they were shooting at the range. It's like, okay, recoil fatigue could be a thing, but like in the middle of a battle, I don't know how much.
You got the adrenaline pumping and everything too. I don't think you'd really care.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Battle of San Juan Hill.
Instead of saying Teddy Roosevelt's favorite battle strategy, they should say his only battlefield strategy.
So I can do a little demonstration here.
Mike's got the Battle of San Juan Hill.
So
right here.
we got little Rough Riders. They're on horses, which are never mentioned at any point during the episode for some reason, even though both warriors were mounted. They got their little Crag carbines. We can see.
Yep.
The bots on settlers, so they're not making units for some reason, even though I declared war on all of them. But so there are some barbarians here, which are same thing as the Spanish, more or less.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So I'm gonna send my Rough Riders to go conquer San Juan Hill. Charging across the river. One got killed.
Heavy casualties.
Better graphics.
Oh, there we go.
Boom! Let's go.
And then after that, huge victory.
Was that Mike's
conquered
touch
the city.
table?
Yep. And
Better graphics at least.
Spain never recovered, did they?
No.
Oh
No, they didn't.
You want me to get into
he's shaking his boots, Mike.
Yeah.
Got him scared.
Oh. Beg for it, Philip. Yeah.
Spain will not stand the test of time.
Let's go.
Well, on that note, it's hard to follow that up. Do you want me to get into the battle, Craig?
Yeah, I will say just to start out, the Teddy Roosevelt guy says that Teddy's strategy was to speak softly and carry a big stick. Also to charge, suppress, and slaughter his enemies.
Hell yeah.
Give us a little rundown of this battle.
The suppress and slaughter tactic. I will start off by saying, unless you want to count Lawrence of Arabia's, this is the first fucking tactics we've gotten so far that doesn't feature a feigned retreat in one of them. Lawrence's is kind of like that, but it's not really. I wouldn't say it's like a misdirection. Anyhow,
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt's suppress and slaughter strategy. They use the Battle of San Juan Hill as an example, and what the show states is that Roosevelt and his men are suppressed in a riverbed with an entrenched enemy up the hill. The Gatling guns lay down suppressing fire on the Spanish, while the Rough Riders charge uphill and slaughter the enemy in close quarters. Gary Harper claims it took them 8 minutes to get up the hill, and in that time, the Gatling guns fired 18,000 rounds. And just in case people haven't picked it up.
Hamster wheeling around things.
Why didn't they do that? That would have been a good idea.
Just like a bunch of hamsters.
Have a hamster cranking the Gatling gun. Come on, little buddy, go.
Jeez.
This little guy has 10,000 confirmed kills.
This little guy's responsible for hundreds of deaths.
He's running out of water. Pee in the little
Pee
bottle.
in the bottle. So we've been referencing it this whole episode, just in case you haven't picked up on it. Gary makes this remark where he looks at Mac and he's like, and Spain never came back, did they? It's a weird shot at Spain, I guess. I don't know. Like,
Yo, Gary v. Spain.
it's like rip to Spain. Roosevelt's men So this was my research. Roosevelt's men had been instructed by American General Henry Lawton to take up position by a riverbed at the bottom of Kettle Hill, which was part of the San Juan Heights, aka San Juan Hill, after which the Rough Riders had no specific orders. Due to bad reconnaissance, however, the Rough Riders found themselves exposed to Spanish rifle fire from the top of the hill. Realizing his men were sitting ducks in the riverbed and in danger of being wiped out, he declared himself the ranking officer at that spot on the battlefield and ordered his men to charge up the hill. Roosevelt was the only man who rode on horseback, as it allowed him to make multiple trips up and down the hill and allowed his men to see him so they could follow his advancements. Roosevelt eventually had to command from foot after his horse got trapped in barbed wire. I will note, because I mentioned him commanding black troops at the beginning of this, there were no black soldiers in the Rough Riders as far as I could find in my research, but the American 24th and 25th Colored Regiments, that's what they were called, played a huge role in taking this hill, and I give them a shout out here in a minute. Some of them, some troops got separated from their usual detachments, and they ended up with the Rough Riders, and Teddy apparently took them under command as well and was like, you guys got to come with us. So the charge was heavily supported by the volley of automatic fire from 3 Gatling guns commanded by Lieutenant John H. Parker, aka Gatling Gun Parker. It's relevant to note that Parker and his Gatling gun detachment were not part of the Rough Riders and were actually part of the U.S. Army's 5th Army Corps. Roosevelt himself noted that the sound of the guns aided in raising the spirits of his men. The actions of Roosevelt and his men were very heroic and were part of a larger assault by American forces all across San Juan Heights. Most importantly, the charge of the 24th and 25th Colored Infantry units, who I mentioned earlier. I mention them here because they were the most instrumental in taking San Juan Heights, but they are often overshadowed by Roosevelt and the Rough Riders just in history. Due to their collective efforts, the United States captured San Juan Heights, but at the cost of heavy casualties. Roosevelt was nominated for the Medal of Honor. However, Army officials dismissed it at the time as they felt Teddy was stealing all the headlines from the war. However, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, in 2001, Teddy was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions that day. So essentially, it's not a lot of tactics going on. What happens is the Rough Riders are pinned down. Teddy's trying to send sentries back and forth because they don't have cell phones or radios at the time. So he's trying to get messengers to run over to the general and get orders, but the general's on a whole different part of the hill. And so at a certain point, his men are taking so much fire from up top this hill, he's basically like, if we stay down here, we're going to get fucking killed. So he orders his men to charge uphill. He did not order the Gatling guns. I think this is really important, especially for this episode. Teddy Roosevelt, I don't know if he ever fired a Gatling gun personally in his life. He did not command Gatling guns on the battlefield. He never did. This was part of a whole different regiment. There were 4 Gatling guns present at the Battle of San Juan Heights that day. 3 of them, under the command of the guy I mentioned, Gatling Gun Parker, as he was known, laid down, and the metric they give on the show is that 18,000 rounds in like 8 minutes or whatever. What I read was that it was 18,000 rounds over the course of the whole battle. They started laying down fire, but it was not like Teddy Roosevelt ordered that. The charge up San Juan Hill is something that's kind of made out of desperation, in that it's basically, we can charge up this hill and try to take it, or we have to leave, basically, because we're down here in this riverbed. We got guys on top of the hill shooting at us. We can shoot back, but we can't hit them, really. We're getting slaughtered. So he charges his men uphill. He's riding back and forth on horseback to try and... He's basically calling advancements, right? Like, they're not all running up in a line. They're running up in groups, and he's commanding them on where to go so men can see him on a horse. he definitely could have gotten fucking shot that day. He definitely could have died, so it is kind of wild that he didn't. The Gatling guns started firing as part of that larger offensive overall where these units are all charging uphill. And I will say the Gatling guns were super effective in that battle. They put down ridiculous amount of suppressing fire on the Spanish trenches that did allow Americans to actually get up into the trench and seize victory that day. So this is sort of Teddy Roosevelt's crowning achievement as far as like as a warrior goes, and it's not really a tactic. I think it shows a lot about his character that he's riding up and down this hill on horseback, and he's not he's able to recount it in journals, and like I mentioned, him and his men, it takes a lot of balls to like charge into a trench of enemy fire. Yeah. Especially he's riding on horse, like he's a huge target going back and forth. But they managed to take the hill that day. All American forces do. And the Rough Riders got their own section of it at Kettle Hill. So I wouldn't call it strategy, but that's the story. So
courage and a little luck.
About to say a lot of courage and a lot of luck. Yeah, exactly. And the Gatling guns certainly made the difference that day. Interesting to note that while they were present for San Juan Hill and they probably kept Teddy Roosevelt alive that day, Teddy Roosevelt did not command those Gatling guns. So a little bit iffy as to whether or not he should even have this weapon on this episode. But it is cool to watch it shoot things. So, Deadliest Warrior.
You think those guys had like one jacked arm and one little tiny arm? They look like the Chargers from Left 4 Dead 2.
You're an infantryman and your arm gets blown off and you're like, but I still want to serve my country. They're like, we're putting you in the Gatling regiment.
I just want to say a small thing from this. Listening to the tactics and reading up on it, it doesn't seem some like revolutionary, only Teddy could think of this tactic. Mm-hmm. From the way it sounds, it seems like a very simple battle drill one reacting to contact kind of or platoon attacks that we're still taught in the Army today's, where you're using a support by fire team or like a crew serve weapon to suppress the enemy. And in that moment that the enemy suppressed, you're moving up on a flank, and then you're crossing that flank during that moment of suppression. And that's still how like platoon attacks, like I said, are taught today. So it's not some like crazy, there's a lot of heroics involved in it, but it's not some like revolutionary special, like only Teddy could have done this kind of tactics being thrown out there.
I wanted to mention this. It was in a previous form of notes I did, that if Teddy were a woman, he would have been called audacious. They would have been like Teddy's intuition and his audacity that day, his audacious attack. So we can go on to Mr. Lawrence and his Phantom Army if you want.
We got some knives first, don't we?
Oh, do we? We get
knife
they
talk.
split up. They split up Mac's touch table. Interesting.
Knife talk, good song. Okay, close range. We got the Bowie Hunter. Stats: weight 0.75 pounds, total length 12.5 inches.
Yeah.
Blade length of 8 inches. Which
that's a
blade
full
length 8 inches honestly is probably too much.
Oh, wait,
right. Yeah. Dude, imagine like how would you carry that around all day?
Wait, what'd you say? What's that?
The blade length. Yeah. Well, but my point is that 8 inches is almost like too much. Like, who wants that much?
You're like 5 inches is almost perfect when you think about it.
Yeah. And you only even need like 2.
Three.
Yeah.
Yeah. You only need like 2-ish. So just saying.
I actually have a full-sized Bowie right there. This is closer to what they have in the Jesse James episode. And yes, that is a cheap one that I bought when I was like 16. So you can take it out and show it, Lucas.
What is a hunter?
Just be careful.
What does it mean, like hunter?
So the hunter knife is much smaller. Okay. Just be careful, Greg. Be very careful. Yeah, right.
That's pretty sharp.
Yeah. So what makes the hunter version different is that it's smaller, so you can actually like carry it in the field. This is not very practical to carry around everywhere. This is pretty heavy.
Unless
And
you're not a man.
if you look in the middle of the knife, it's got that groove down the middle, which is a blood groove for like, I think the Bowie Hunter that they show is really meant like the original Bowie knife as an all-purpose knife. Like you would carry this, and this knife would allow you to go hunting, field dress an animal, open a can of beans, or if you needed to stab somebody after a poker game, you know, you
It's
could.
heavy enough, it would just, you'd hit it like the can of beans would explode.
You can see why the Bowie Hunter was a shortened version for like general issue, because this thing is heavy and ridiculous. Remember when this lost out to the stiletto because the stiletto was tinier? And I thought it was interesting, Lucas, they pointed out how similar looking the Bowie knife is to the K-bar, like the modern K-bar that the Army
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it
issues.
just inspired it.
Yeah. So we'll set that down before someone hurts themselves.
Want to see how fast I could swing it?
Yeah, your throw. So let's test the throwing ability.
Brandon, can you stand over there? Quay mentions the utility of the knife, but in a clearly scripted moment, Richard counters that their weapon is made for combat, not utility, which is a valid point. You know, it's jack of all trades versus something that's purely made for combat. So we get the Jambia dagger, which is fun to say. Stats 1.5 pounds, total length of 5.5 inches, blade length 9 inches. Again, way too much.
It's 15.5.
Yeah, it's 15.5.
What did I say?
You got 5.5.
I'm sorry, I read 15.5.
And I think-
That'd be a better length.
And I think Craig, because five, 5.5 is more than enough.
yeah, it's plenty.
15.5.
Jesus. I think I had a Freudian slip. Okay. What is a Jambia?
Sure. So this famous dagger, why is it given to Lawrence of Arabia on this episode? It was given to him by Sheriff Nasir in 1917 after the victory of the Arabs at Aqaba, in modern-day Jordan. So very recently, this same knife that he had was acquired by the National Army Museum in the UK, and they also secured that with the robes that once belonged to him. And so you can go there and like see his actual knife. The Jambia is from the Hadramaut region of Yemen and spread to other countries in the Middle East and Arab world. So men above the age of 14 typically wear it as an accessory to their clothing, and it was kind of seen as more of a status symbol. While it is still a weapon, there are societal norms which must be followed in order to avoid defamation. It should only come out of its sheath in extreme cases of conflict, and it was more commonly used in traditional events such as dances or, formal events. It is designed as a curved knife, so the blade bends towards the opponent, so the user does not need to angle their wrist. This makes it a very comfortable stabbing weapon, and its very heavy blade enables the user to inflict deep wounds. So it's kind of more of a traditional, like, symbolic weapon, but
Included in a sarcophagus.
yes, yeah, it's on his. Is that his?
Yeah,
It's on,
that's
where he's like holding
yeah.
it too. Yeah, and then you could see his actual one, but
So him earning that Jambia is indicative of like how this man had to come in as a complete foreigner to the Arab culture and like earn his place among them.
it was symbolically given to him
Yeah.
as like a thank you and like we accept you essentially.
I don't know. I'd be interested to see. I don't know. I'm about to make this claim. I'd be interested to see if like how many foreigners, especially like foreign white Europeans, ever earned
Probably not
like a Jambia dagger from a tribe. Like
a legit one.
it's a huge it's wild that Lawrence of Arabia's story is insane.
Yes,
dude.
it is. Yeah.
Like Teddy's is interesting and fascinating, and Lawrence's is just like off the fucking walls. Like how is this guy for real?
You're just like, what is he doing?
Yeah, right. I know.
Well, let's continue.
Mike, did you have notes on the Bowie Hunter? I know you took that section.
Yeah.
I also want to. Can we get a civ check?
I moved to the other continent. I declared war on another Spain, so they're still out there like cockroaches. to make sure they pay for what they did to the main.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see my army of a couple bombards and mainly Rough Riders. So they're,
Hey, those bombards should be Gatling guns.
head cannon. There are no Gatling guns
Right.
here. Can I do a war of colonial expansion? You have not denounced. I'm going to denounce this player so I can do a war of colonial expansion. I think.
Mike, have you completed fascism yet?
I have not. Unfortunately, I am still a. What am I? What's my government? Few governments. I am a theocracy.
Yeah, that's on track for like the domination victory.
Yeah.
Imagine America having like a bunch of fascists like in the country.
Yeah,
That would
couldn't
be
me.
obsessed with the military and shit. Like that would be fucking crazy. Mike, can continue.
But notes on the Bowie Hunter. It's a knife. Yeah, no, honestly, what I was seeing is that it's more like known with Teddy Roosevelt more for being his hunting knife than anything combat related. And I think it's probably like Teddy Roosevelt was a very famous hunter, of course. So I think that's where the knife really gets its fame, the Bowie Hunter, wink, wink. And most of what I saw on it were ads to buy cheap replicas of Bowie knives that have Rough Rider on it for $19 from Amazon.
Like this one.
So yeah, it's a knife. It's cool. Knives don't serve a purpose in modern combat, and this is technically modern combat. So yeah.
You think a bayonet would be more relevant than the knife. So
I do have notes on the test, but really
I was gonna say let's move on to the pig test. So
We get our pigs back.
yeah,
I'd love to see
stabbing some pigs.
Yeah,
Nothing
much
like
miss.
wasting some meat.
Right. So we get a test designed to mimic a chaotic scrum. So again, with the creative tests, 2 pigs on a wire at different angles. Quay goes first, and Jeff yells,
On 3, 2, 1, release the pig!
which is awesome. Target 1 is wounded, but not significantly. The other is insta-killed. Then Richard is next. Jeff again demands that the pig be released. Richard slashes more while the Bowie knife stabs. I should say, Richard does more slashing versus the stabbing of the Bowie knife. 2 instant kills, and Richard is 20% faster. Jeff hits us with a much-needed phallic reference saying, size does matter, before giving the edge to the Jambia. Before we get into the edge, let's talk about the test. Mike, you said you had some thoughts.
This was like one of the most boring. No, the premise of the test is cool. Having 2 pigs come back to back, doubling down on like the double pigs DP action. But just the experts, they were just boring. I need my like Rob Roy freaking out.
Rob Roy do to a pig, just like
with the fucking Jambia dagger.
It would just be like a Gears of War gore pile. Just like
Cut to Max's face.
the soy face.
Yeah, the soy facing like, oh my god.
Yeah, like, you see like blood, everything, and he turns around. Pork chops.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they don't let you cut the turkey.
Civ note. I just recruited Napoleon Bonaparte to lead my Rough Riders.
Oh,
we love a little lighter mixing.
what are the odds that comes up in the middle of a pod?
Hopefully
Love
Spain
that.
doesn't get George Washington.
Oh no,
You're fucked. Dude, there's no denying. There's no denying, man. That knife is a big beefy boy that does some sweet damage. So I really tried looking up whether it would be used in combat, and I got Reddit and like sources, kind of probably not the best most reliable sources, and a lot of them there was just so much debate where it was like some were like yes, some were like no. So I have no idea whether it would actually be used. I'm happy with the damage.
I would bitch. My only bitch is that fucking Quay stabs the pig like up to the hilt with that Bowie hunter, and Dorian comes in and he's like, well, so this would definitely be a mortal wound, but it's not a kill. And again, what is happening on the sim? Is there a medic? Is there a cleric in the squad that's like casting healing spells? Because like A mortal wound is a fucking death blow.
Yeah, what about
this,
poopage?
Yeah, poopage.
Yeah, Dorian, like, this season is, like, too hard into his role of, like, I don't know. Instead of, I feel like he's like, oh, I can't just call everything an instant kill. So he's trying to be, like, more diversive of, like, well, that's not a kill.
Hey, I don't know whether the Jambia was actually used in combat or not. I don't really know whether the Bowie Hunter was used in combat or not. The Jambia, it's fucking bigger.
Yeah.
I would rather have that. Even though 5 is more than enough, 15 and a half wouldn't be too bad. However, my biggest argument is that I think Johnny Lufrado and his stiletto with its critical 3-inch blade would get the edge over both these knives. So,
Agreed.
Yeah.
It's a fucking pistol. Use it like a pistol.
Thank you, Mike.
Yo, we don't get the touch table next. I believe they refer to it as Max Chalk Talk.
Max Chalk Talk, yo.
Favorite. So we get the port of Aqaba. David Attenborough talks about the Phantom Army strategy. Kind of like how Mac always asks experts to boil down a general's battle. I kind of like how I've noticed this with Mac is he will ask each expert to boil down like in one sentence what their battle strategy is, which I think is very smart because obviously this stuff can get very detailed and long-winded. Mac's just like describe it in like one phrase.
And I have to say, Suppress and Slaughter and Phantom Army sound pretty fucking cool. Like both of those sound dope.
But they translate to like two separate. Like Phantom Army is just guerrilla warfare.
Yeah,
Sounds like some Metal Gear Solid shit.
Basically like hit and run.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's hear about Larry's Phantom Army.
Lucas.
Yeah, let me help you get you back up.
Okay, your 5.5 is shrinking there.
So taking the port of Aqaba. Essentially, his plan for taking this port was to set up an attack on Damascus and Aleppo, which I don't think they mentioned that second one in the show. Which
and
would
what
draw
is
the attention.
Aleppo?
Which would draw the attention away from Aqaba, which was his real target. So why is this place so important? Because it was currently, at the time, the only city that was a water port that would allow the British ships to supply the Arab forces and put added pressure on the Ottoman Empire. So they made a dash across the desert, occasionally stopping to blow up Turkish railroad tracks, because you know my boy loved that, or to create diversions to confuse the enemy about what the real goal was. They also picked up fighters from tribes along the way with the help of some British gold and amassed an army of about 500 strong riders, riding dozens of horses and pretty much hundreds of camels at this point. So after the diversions were completed, the battle officially was fought on July 2nd, 1917. Lawrence and the Arabs surrounded the city and were firing down from the hills on one of the hottest days of that year. Then a mounted charge was started, in which Lawrence was among the men. They rode horses and camels down the hills, firing along the way. According to one account, in the charge down the hills, Lawrence felt himself being thrown from the saddle. When he got up, he realized he had mistakenly shot his own camel in the back of the head.
Oh, no.
However, he returned to fighting, and the city shortly surrendered. So, July 6, 1917, Lawrence, in his own words, splashed into the sea. However, with thousands of mouths to feed and no food, Lawrence rode an additional 150 miles across the Sinai Desert to bring word of the triumph to the British and the Egypt and gain supplies.
It's just what I mean, like, insane.
Yeah.
I would never ride 150 miles in my fucking
After
life.
a battle.
All right? Unless it's a car.
Falls off his thing is, shit. He shot his own camel in the back of the head by accident.
A car. Mistakes happen. Rip to Lawrence's camel. Yeah. Very fascinating to learn about the Phantom Army.
Yeah, I mean, pretty cool tactic where there's literally this port city where you need supplies, got tons of people to feed, and that's pretty much going to be their new lifeblood to supply these Arab forces. And so he comes up with the genius idea of the diversion and then the direct attack.
Yeah.
Once the forces are confused.
I didn't understand the whole holding his head in his hands, inspiring an army.
I couldn't find something about that in the actual Accord. I found something that whenever his men were up on the hill, they were firing down on the city, and very few of them were like landing actual shots. And he kind of called them pussies.
Yeah.
Which inspired the charge down the hill. I didn't see like the holding the hands.
It's
or
like when your
heads
boy's
hands.
trying to get off for the night and you know you got one more dub in and you call him a little bitch and he gets up and he stays on for that next dub.
Mike's talking about playing Xbox. I thought he was going a totally different direction. He's like, when your boy's trying to get off that night, it's like, oh,
Yeah, there was some
It's
record.
5.5 inches.
you'd be selfish not to help him out. So
There was some record
Yeah.
that he like insulted his men up on that hill, and that like is what inspired the, because they're like, oh well, we're just gonna charge them and shoot them now.
yeah, I guess the reference is like he's doing some kind of signal that
I
they
understand, was he,
understand means he's like calling them out. Yeah, he's doing like a sim emote, like
Yeah.
"Whoa."
I
when you forget to install a toilet in your Sim's house and he's pissed off at you.
right. So Edge goes to Larry. What's interesting is Mac says kind of what you pointed out, that Teddy was lucky that his tactic worked.
Yeah.
So Lawrence is a far better tactician. So they are at least mentioning that even though the show depicts him as this great strategist, that this wasn't the most sophisticated strategy, and he was lucky that he was able to get it off.
Yeah.
Okay. So next, a former Green Beret breaks down the X factors for each warrior. The first X factor is calm under fire. Teddy gets an 86. Larry gets an 81. Okay.
Oh, I did have a note about the X factors. By the way, I agree with that Edge.
Oh, yes, we were going to talk
absolutely,
about it.
Yeah, I mean that battle is literally one of like the key points of World War One. Also, that you know,
And to me, the factor of tactics, and they do touch on this in the aftermath, it's interesting. The factor of tactics to me is the full stop, in my opinion, about this episode. Like, I feel like Lawrence of Arabia is just a fucking battlefield genius, and like did all this crazy stuff. I feel like Teddy Roosevelt is not some strategic genius. He was obviously a very intelligent man, but just going by the historical examples, like, come on, dude. Like, I feel like Lawrence could probably play Teddy Roosevelt like a fucking fiddle, you know? So just before the X Factors are listed off, we get a look at some of the fake sim footage on Robert Daly's computer. In one shot, we can see different types of terrain. One type listed is simply called hills, which I thought was funny because you can have hills in like snow or jungle. But even better is that there's an indoor category. So I started laughing because I was picturing Teddy and his Rough Riders trying to wheel the Gatling gun through a door. Like, all right, what if we turn it sideways? Like, can we wheel it through there? Shit, we're gonna have to go through the window, dude. I'm gonna have to take the window out. Getting a couch into your house. So
That's where logistic comes into play.
Yeah.
Is getting it through the door.
and then calm under fire, Teddy getting the edge. Just like I said, I'd like to point out to anybody who didn't realize up to this point,
Lawrence is leading
Lawrence.
in this point.
So the SMLE it got called even. The SMLE outscores the Craig in the actual sim. Lawrence of Arabia gets the edge in every single category except for the Gatling gun and this one single X factor.
Yeah. Which is calm under fire. What does that mean?
But and I'm not going to spoil anything, but he might not win. So it kind of feels a little weird. But
Mike, do you have something to say?
No, I just said the Gatling gun X Factor is what wins the show.
yeah,
Maybe.
the indoor cat.
It might.
It might.
They're just fighting inside like a building.
Like a mall.
Lawrence of Arabia was hiding in there, like having a spot of tea out of his Vickers.
Right.
All of a sudden, is that a Gatling gun?
He's like, oh, who pissed in me, Vickers?
Okay.
Actually, I kind of like that someone did that to me.
It's humiliating.
Let's move on. Endurance, Teddy gets a 71, Larry gets an 88. Just more physically fit. 71 also might be one of the lowest.
Can I say, how does Lawrence of Arabia not get like an A in endurance.
Right.
They keep
Dude lives in the desert.
They keep saying throughout this episode he could run a sub 5-minute mile. How is that not an A in like endurance? And I wrote on here, interesting enough, because you can see this. I obviously wrote these notes before the Rangers episode because I kept remarking they keep giving 88s to people, like Napoleon getting an 88 in tactics, Lawrence getting an 88 in endurance. And I'm like, so I wrote a note, like, do they just not give 90s to anybody? Is 88 like the max?
88's a cop out.
88 is not the max because the Rangers North Koreans.
And Zombie vs. Vampires.
So we haven't gotten there yet.
Okay,
so I don't know. But there's a couple episodes, there's a couple things where they give like an 89 or a 90. So it's not the ceiling in the sim. So I found it very odd that Larry doesn't get an A in, I don't know, maybe I'm viewing it too much as like an A-B thing, but like a 90 to 100
perspective, yeah.
a 90 to 100 is a fucking A. Like, how does he not get an A? Right. Like, a sub 5-minute mile, B plus.
Especially, you know, I think the
versus Teddy's C minus. Like,
the school grading system makes sense because they're clearly not really using the bottom rung.
Mm-hmm.
So just like, you know, 50 or below is an F.
Yes,
that's, I think, equivalent to what we're talking about Deadliest Warrior, which I think is kind of dumb because I don't know. There's not that much of a difference between these.
I think I turn it into that in my mind because, as we've mentioned, like, what's the difference between a 70 and a 72? It seems extremely arbitrary, so I try to frame it in terms of like grading. Like, are they getting a B plus? Because I feel like that's more meaningful in my mind. Like a range of score, like 85 to 90 or 85 to 89 is like a B plus. And so I'm always kind of baffled when these guys don't get like a fucking A rating. Because again, comes back to what is 100? Is 100 like the Incredible Hulk? You know what I mean? Like, what is the perfect warrior? I don't know.
Yeah.
Robert Daly?
And we get a couple more X factors that aren't mentioned till the end of the show.
Robert Daly, deceit. Once he gets a 91. Sorry.
It's okay. Battlefield experience, which might be our first repeating X Factor, because isn't this on Joan of Arc?
Maybe. So they covered Battlefield Tactics, obviously. I wrote that Battlefield experience I got off the wiki page, and it is only mentioned in the original broadcast available on Spike.com.
I saw it, though. I saw it on the Amazon.
I didn't see it on the Amazon category. I don't know what. Maybe you saw it and I totally forgot about it. So
yeah, I don't know, because I definitely did not go on the wiki.
Because I thought they mentioned Battlefield Tactics, and they gave Lawrence an 81, Teddy a 75. And so I Googled, because I had noticed like they were leaving X Factors out of certain matchups. And I saw this Battlefield experience one, so I don't know. Maybe you are right. So
that would be interesting.
Whatever. Yeah.
So Teddy gets a 67.
Yeah.
And Larry gets 76.
Yeah, those are the numbers I have. So
tactics not mentioned either. Teddy 75, Larry 81.
Nice.
Not barely even a B from Lawrence of Arabia.
B minus to Lawrence of Arabia.
Overwhelming edge factor edge to Lawrence.
Which, you know, folks, if you've watched this season 3 so far, you know the guy that gets more X factors, they're setting him up for the L. The fat L.
All these different X factors up here, but up here you have a gun jam.
Yeah, right.
That completely overpowers any sort
everything.
Of X factor.
One jam gun
honestly
ended World War I.
It's kind of wild. So far, we've recorded like 5 or 6 episodes. Every single one, the guy that gets more X factors has lost, except for, this episode's not out yet on our channel, but Genghis Khan versus Hannibal. And I remember we remarked, because we were surprised that they didn't at least give Hannibal the courtesy X factor thing, but it was such a landslide that they couldn't. Yeah. You know.
Okay, well, let's get into the sim, but before that, Civ check.
I just got Spanish conquering another Spain on a whole
Nice.
different continent. So I believe I got three more Spains to conquer before the Rough Riders have won the Spanish-American War and conquered the world.
Hell yeah.
Did not need fascism to do it. So, whenever you're feeling like resorting to fascism to, win a war, you don't need it.
But
it's
much like
just
the real America, the fascism is right on the edge. It's so tempting.
yeah, it's right
It's
there.
right there.
This is
You
the
don't
Teddy
need it.
Roosevelt theocracy, which I like.
I hear if you can see one Spain, there's like 100 in your walls you can't see.
Right. Well, let's get into Lucas's battle sim corner.
Grandmaster.
Yeah. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Probably not as many ladies as there are gentlemen. Back to the late 19th, early 20th century, whenever this one's set, for the most coveted matchup of Deadliest Warrior ever. I am your sim Grandmaster Lucas. Two battlefield behemoths, ready to duke it out in a virtual world of Green Beret Robert Daly's sim. Time to put on your robes, comb your Teddy mustache, put on a weird cowboy hat thing, and load up those bolt action rifles.
Suspenders.
With your 10-round stripper clips. Load them up. If you would all please raise your right hands and stick out those pointer fingers and get ready to hit that ender button to unleash the chaos. Welcome to Lucas's Sim Corner. We open up on Teddy hanging out on a hillside with his men straight chilling around a Gatling gun. One guy's trying to figure out how the fuck you reload the Craig. Just then, Teddy, with his perfect 20/20 vision, looks up and sees the most out-of-place man I've ever seen in my life. It's Lawrence of Arabia, about as far from Arabia as you can be. He walks up the hillside, and his eyes meet Teddy, and you know a battle has to go down. Men talk with bullets, not words. Lawrence gives a wave of his hand, and his men come up over the hillside carrying a Vickers machine gun, while we get some generic action movie kicking in the background. Teddy gives the command to prep the Gatling gun, while Lawrence's team starts setting up the Vickers. It's almost like newer technology that's easier to utilize, and the Vickers opens fire first. Just then, the Gatling gun starts to return fire, but it's too late, and one of Teddy's guys gets gunned down. Both teams then open fire with their bolt-action rifles to add to the chaos. Teddy uses his calm under-fire jutsu to shoot a guy even though he's under machine gun fire. Just then, the Vickers either runs out of ammo or they did like a fake dumb jam thing.
Also, did you notice
retreat over the hillside.
both teams during this are just standing up in the open, no cover, not going prone or anything, as two machine guns are shooting at each other. No one even attempts to conceal themselves.
Calm under fire.
Hey, real quick, guys, I just want to throw this out there. In the Joan of Arc episode, one of the X factors is metallurgy. What do you think Teddy's metallurgy rating was?
1,000. So, Lawrence's guys retreat down over the hill the other way. Teddy orders his men to chase them up the hill. Sound familiar? Like the battle he was in?
Oh, shit.
Up the hill. He gives the order to cease fire on the Gatling gun as his men go to check on the dead guy, forgetting they're still in a battle. Then Lawrence and his guys sneak around the place with like 8 sticks of dynamite we have not heard or seen from in this episode yet, and stick it near Teddy's guys' feet. We get a monstrous explosion, possibly a diversion, as Teddy and his guys wheel the Gatling gun around the other way. Oh no, it's a surprise ambush, and one of Teddy's guys gets shot by the SMLE. He tells his men to get back on the Gatling gun, but oh no, just over his shoulder, you can see him being snuck up on. This is about to be really cool. Okay, never mind, he got gunned down by the Gatling gun. I guess that thing just has like infinite ammo.
Yeah.
Oh shit, Teddy gets hit by a bullet just like real life, but only stumbles down for a second. His men return fire and make the man pay with a bullet to the head. Teddy gets up and says, "I'm okay," just to see his boy's head explode right next to him. That's psychological damage. They return fire and take down Lawrence's last guy, and Lawrence has to go on the run. He leads them on a 5-minute mile, presumably. He then jumps down into a trench, and Teddy's last guy jumps down to meet him. Lawrence pulls out his dagger and cuts the man to shreds. He falls over, revealing that Teddy's been there the whole time, and he's pissed. He pulls out his buoy, and it's on. We get some back and forth wild swings and one straight punch to Lawrence's face. Just then,
Fucking punches him in the face.
just then, Teddy grabs his robes, wraps his hand around it, and pulls him in as the knife enters Lawrence. He pulls the knife out. Lawrence falls over dead. Just want to pull out multiple times this season. Dorian has told us that a stab to the stomach is not a kill shot.
Yep. Yeah, that's a mortal wound, but
He could have gone up, kept fighting, but either way, today's winner, Deadliest Warrior, is Theodore Roosevelt.
Like, what are you gonna say?
Did Lawrence enjoy it?
he was like, "Ooh."
I don't go either way about this.
Craig, can you give us a remark on that final Jambia kill?
Yes. So, for those of you at home may have noticed, the final person on Teddy's team that gets killed is none other than world-renowned Roman expert Terrence Rotolo.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's actually the guy who gets killed. I took a little picture here. It looks kind of funny.
This man is dead.
Yes.
You can see him throughout the episode too as one of Teddy's Rough Riders and like all the B-roll footage.
Which is funny. In the universe of Deadliest Warrior, like that, an expert on the show is in the reenactment. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Like, and I did verify it was him. I looked in the credits. And this, I'm so glad I found this. He's listed in the credits right next to a guy named Billy Bussy. It's written that way.
Oh, you know Billy's got
Sounds like a fucking Wild West like outlaw. It's to the bussy.
Billy Bussy. To me, it sounds like something else.
Yeah.
Maybe he should go by Bill.
I think his name is Billy Bussy. I saw that. I was like, oh, hell yeah.
It's hot.
So check out the credits and you'll see TJ Rotolo right next to Billy Bussy. Okay.
This man is dead.
Right. This man is tight. Results. We have another closest battle that we've had to date.
Oh, yeah. Can
It's
I
just a lie.
Can I fucking remark Robert Daly delivers his catchphrase? This is one of the closest battles we've had to date, and all I wrote was "fuck you."
You have any fuck you, Robert Daly's I put in my notes that I just skip over?
I'm so sick of it. It's such a dead meme at this point. Every single episode, every single one, he's like, and this is one of the closest. This battle was really close. It's like, shut the fuck up, dude. Oh my god.
Yeah.
They're all the
I
same
can't believe
stats.
you'd say that about a veteran, especially a veteran of like, special
Yeah, that's
operations.
fucked up of me to say that about an SF guy. Sorry. Results.
Results.
Let's go.
Shafting.
So we have Teddy with 2,582, which is 51.64%. To Lawrence's 2,418, 48.36%. In Robert Daly's defense, which is a sentence not many people have said, it is within 100 battles. So it is pretty tight, like Billy Bussy. So weapon effectiveness, Crag versus SMLE. Crag gets 48% to the SMLE's 54%. Bowie 33% to the Jambia 67%, which, you know, Jambia has the edge, but I doubt it really impacts.
Oh yeah. Why did I write 77%? It's because I can't do math.
Because you're stupid.
It's because I can't do math.
Gatling 58% to the Vickers 42%. 10,316 kills versus 7,544 Gatling versus Vickers. So kind of a little in-depth breakdown of how many kills.
This fucking triggered me.
Applies.
Shafted.
So
Lawrence
much.
got shafted.
I'm not even the Lawrence guy. It triggered me so much that they're like, all right, so I bet you're wondering how it is that Lawrence lost, even though he got the edge and everything. Well, you see, not all ranges are the same. So the Gatling gun ended up with 10,300 kills and the Vickers was 7,544. Why don't you give that to us every episode? You know why? Because they don't have that stat. Because there is not a sim. They don't run 10,000 battles. It makes no fucking sense. They just pulled it out for this one particular episode and they never bring it up ever again so that they can justify this guy winning the match.
Older technology beating the technology that like replaced it.
Yeah, for somehow, my top note on my final thoughts is the Gatling gun is the deadliest warrior. Teddy Roosevelt does not win this matchup like the Gatling gun does, and I'll save the rest of my final thoughts till after the aftermath. But
I normally don't even write afterthoughts, but I did this time. For like the first time.
Pretty wild to me.
Go ahead, Mike.
So does the Gatling gun win? Or does the jam lose?
Right. Yeah, the jam.
It's jam.
That jam is equivalent to like a little over 2,000 kills difference in the sim, apparently.
Right.
So
well, before we get into final thoughts, let's get into Craig's sim talk or aftermath talk.
Craig's aftermath corner.
Dun, 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 dun.
Okay. So the panel is Gary Harper, series producer David Hale, who we haven't seen.
What about
and
Billy
Jeff.
Bussey? Is he on?
Billy Bussey.
I'm sorry.
Billy Bussey. Mike, are you a Bussey fan?
Big Bussey head.
Okay, cool. Okay.
make that the short for this episode.
I was thinking about it.
Teddy Roosevelt, big bussy head.
Mike, do you know what a bussy is?
Yeah. Do you want me to say it? Or
Yeah, say it.
boy pussy?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. Okay. I know you're not as chronically online as like me and Matt, so I just wanted to make
That
sure
is
you
true.
were aware.
Well,
How do you
brains
not
are-
know what pussy is?
I mean, I don't know. Audience, comment if you were aware what a bussy is.
Comment if you're pro or nay bussy.
This is the Riz of this episode, except it's bussy. All right, I'm ready for that aftermath. That bussin' aftermath.
All right, let's go. So I'm not sure if this was said, but it said in the show, but Kieran says that the Gatling gun is owned by Gary from his personal collection. Says he's fired 250,000 rounds since 1991, which is oddly specific, but he just carries that Gatling gun around everywhere.
I'm sure his wife loves it.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that at a range, Matt? Just some old guy just wheeling out his fucking crank Gatling gun. You're there just trying to sight in your hunting rifle.
You're with your hunting rifle and this guy's big dicking you off to the side. You're just like, and the range officer's like, "Sir, no rapid fire."
He walks over to you, Billy Bussey. Billy Bussey. Nice to meet you.
No Gatling guns. David says a guiding principle for season 3 is, quote, logic. No explanation needed.
Beyond parody. Like,
so he says that compared to Pirate vs. Knight, he compares the Pirate vs. Knight to the scene in Indiana Jones where the Indy shoots the sword guy.
oh,
And this is something where wars were selected in part this season because of their closeness and time periods, but then mentions Hannibal v. Genghis, which just contradicts himself.
right.
So I don't know.
He's like, except for that one where there's a 1,300-year gap.
He says the theme of this show was toughness. Okay.
Very cool.
Sure.
Jeff, in a semi-question about X Factors, says that X Factors only account for 20% of the outcome. Jeff says that the edges are more the opinions of the team at the time and are not factored into the sim, which is more the objective data. Okay. A viewer accuses Robert Daly of just making up the X Factor numbers and asks who the we is for who comes up with the numbers. So first off, shout out to that commenter, first of all, for calling him out. Second, shout out to Kieran and the Aftermath crew.
For
If we
reading
ever
that.
talk to Kieran, I want to be like, listen, You guys did not hold back. None of these questions were softballs. A lot of these are just blatantly calling out this show.
The fakeness of the show.
Yeah, and you got to respect that. And as fake as the show is. I think it's... I don't know if it's David or Jeff that says it's mostly Robert's team at Pipeworks and that they're made an effort to stay separate from the producers when they come up with the numbers.
Yeah, so Robert's team at Pipeworks, which is a video game design company, not a fucking academic round table of engineers and historians. What has he taught? Oh my God.
And they were like, we made an effort to keep it separate so there wouldn't be any interference.
Robert Daly writes these numbers down in a notebook like 5 minutes before the show. Like 5 minutes before the X Factor segment, he sits down and is like, 88. And if he's got the edge there, then like, I guess he's got a 71. I don't know.
It reminds me of the Mr. Plunkett joke where they're talking about Order 66 and it's George Lucas writing it down.
Yep.
And he's like, how about Order 666? No, that's too obvious. How about Order 6? Well, and this doesn't sound like they don't get too many orders.
How about 66? Yeah. No, that is how the X Factors are determined.
Right. Have you ever asked if there is an American bias on this show?
Yes. Well, considering that American never loses after the Green Beret episode,
and even like tangentially connected or like semi-connected Americans don't lose, like the Comanche and Apache.
Yeah. Although that does change at the end of this season, so I don't want to get into it. I don't want to spoil anything.
Right.
I didn't know anyone watched that episode.
Right.
So with that question, Jeff jumps on the grenade as a Canadian and says, didn't this guy sing Green Beret versus Spetsnaz? As if that alone.
They bring that up. It's seriously like, remember that episode we did like 3 years ago? That one time? And it's like, yeah, I do.
You got massive amounts of hate afterward?
Yeah, I do remember it. And I remember that you guys got bitched out and no American lost after that. Like,
yeah. David says that it's all coincidence and, quote, the sim doesn't lie.
This one is the most blatant. Like, I was pissed about the Washington episode because they just stack so much in Washington. It's like the fucking Kolish Mard that made up crap and giving Washington 2 rifles instead of like 1. And but at least I acknowledged on that episode, like in a 5-on-5, maybe Washington does have an edge. In like army on army in a real war, maybe Washington fights a guerrilla war successfully against Napoleon. My problem is that like 5-on-5 is irrelevant for those two. And in an open field, which is what Deadliest Warrior is, fucking Napoleon's army absolutely steamrolls the Continental Army. With this, it's even more obvious. Like Teddy Roosevelt, I'm sorry. I know there's probably some Ted heads out there. Mike, self-described Ted head.
And pussy lover.
Hey, yeah. I like Teddy Roosevelt too. Okay.
What about Bussy?
We'll leave that off the record. You know I'm a fan. So, Teddy Roosevelt, very interesting historical figure. When I think about him, I do not immediately gravitate to the idea that he's a warrior.
I think like politician.
When I saw that episode, like Teddy Roosevelt versus Lawrence, like, yeah, if you want to make it work, it's a good matchup. But it's kind of like, it makes you laugh when you hear it. You're like, oh my God, Teddy Roosevelt? Like, why is he on here for any other reason than that he's like a popular American president? And they just needed someone from his time period to fight him. Yeah, I don't know, man. The show is biased. I mean, we know this. It's an American show, so the Americans win. But and Robert Daly does make up those X factors. And they don't mean anything.
We're doing final thoughts. I'm ready to just lay it out here.
Before you get to that, is this the aftermath where they bring up X factors only being like 20% of
I said that.
Oh, okay, you did say that. How ridiculous is that? That is the dumbest thing I've ever fucking heard. They're like, Jeff's like, well, the weapons make up about 80% of the outcome and the X factors are only about 20%. How does that make any sense? Like, wouldn't battlefield tactics affect every single weapon, every single round? You know what I mean? Wouldn't X factors be like, if you're creating a character in an RPG game, and I cite that because if there is a sim, that's what it's the closest thing to. X factors are like the stats you're putting into the character. And then the weapons they get are the equipment. Your character stats would affect every single engagement you have in the game or in the simulation. So I don't know. It's Jeff almost gave away a little bit of the game there where he was like, look, man, the weapons are what matters. The X factor, he's like, we give that as a paltry gift to the loser, the loser of the episode.
Right. I think we're almost done here. Mildly interesting. Gary says that he got to see the firearms test in Ivan the Terrible versus Hernan Cortez, suggesting the episodes were filmed at the same time, maybe. And a few times Jeff mentions the Deadliest Warrior Armory web series. So this is like a sub-series of the Aftermath, where they would review 2 weapons from each episode with David Baker, or 2 weapons from each episode with David Baker. So it appears these episodes are lost, but there are summaries of them on the Deadliest Warrior wiki. I'm not going to summarize them because they're kind of whatever, but they are there, which I thought was another kind of element that we haven't seen with Deadliest Warrior. So, but that's all I got. I'll give my final thoughts first because they're pretty short, and then we'll get to Lucas because I know he's chomping at the bit.
Yeah.
I want to say, I think this time period, it's smart they have this because I feel like this time period is somewhat like lost. I feel like in a lot of people's minds, at least American history, it's like the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II.
World War II, yep.
So this time period doesn't get a lot of love, especially you have these bridge guns from what we see in World War II to, you know, rifles and stuff. They're pretty cool, and stuff like the Gatling gun that doesn't get a lot of love. So I'm really glad that they chose this time period, and I think these are 2 cool warriors. I mean, the Aftermath, I think, is just an American bias. The more I learn about Teddy Roosevelt, he's cool, but he had very little generalship experience, which, I mean, in a one-on-one fight, well, even in a one-on-one fight, Lawrence is going to beat him. So it's like, I just don't agree with the outcome. I'm not that passionate about one way or the other, but, you know, in the episode, not bad.
Yeah.
That's my final thoughts.
I'll go because I don't think I have as much as Lucas.
That's pretty short too.
I enjoyed this episode too, Craig. I really liked it. I like that they tried to do a little bit more in the bolt action segment than they usually do with these rifles. Like I said, I get so sick of seeing them just take an M4 and fire 30 rounds into a pig and then be like, whoa, how do we call the edge here? And it's like, I don't know, maybe try something else. So I like that they tried at least with the SMLE and the Craig, you know, whether it was perfect or not. I like that they tried. I enjoyed that segment. The Gatling and the Vickers are both cool. I wish we could have got, like, they should have put them on the back of a train, man, and had them fire, and that would have been sick.
Put them on a biplane.
Yeah, you know,
Al Capone's train.
Yeah, Al Capone's train. They were cool. I just disagree with the outcome, but I could get, like, I've already been a little mad about it. I could get ultra triggered about it and be like, oh, the American always wins. It's old hat at this point, though. Like, we know that happens. The outcome's not that important. I feel like Lawrence is going to have so much greater battlefield tactics than like Teddy and the Rough Riders that even in a straight up 5-on-5, like I think he's going to kick his ass probably. So plus the tech advantage, you know, I don't know, everything goes Lawrence's way. I'm sorry, but except the outcome. I also think it's relevant that Teddy Roosevelt, from my research, never commanded Gatling guns. And that's I know it's at a huge part of San Juan Hill, but it's the deciding factor of the episode. So I'm taking, you know, in good faith that even any of this is real. It's not fair that decides the outcome. Lawrence at least had Vickers at his disposal. Like, he probably commanded men with them. Teddy Roosevelt he wasn't riding around with a Gatling gun. Like, he didn't do that shit. So someone just happened to be firing on the hill that day as part of a larger offensive. So Teddy Roosevelt, fascinating character in American history. I don't think he's the same caliber of warrior as Lawrence of Arabia. Teddy was brave and intelligent. He was also very lucky on that day. So not nearly the same level of battlefield tactician, or not nearly the same level, like the body of work that Lawrence of Arabia has. So I disagree with the outcome. All that being said, I did enjoy the episode. I liked it for the most part. I thought this was a cool time period with some cool guns, and I got to watch a Craig segment with my dad, which was fun. And that's what Deadliest Warrior is all about, is watching somebody shoot a mannequin with a bolt action rifle
and palling around with your dad.
Blood packet explodes. Lucas?
Yeah. So I never even write like a formal opinion at the end. I usually just freeball it. But I had to write something down for this. I've been waiting all day just to, get this episode off my chest. I feel like we started at 10 a.m. It's 6:30 p.m. now, and I could finally just give my final opinions on this. I said at the beginning, I kind of forgot this episode even existed. So it was like a fresh rewatch for me. And yeah, it is a really good episode. In some aspects, I appreciate the science that they try to bring into it with the FBI clay and tracking a little bit of the bullet speed and doing some like motion under fire tests. And we get a little more focus on the bolt action rifles in this one. It's BS science, but I appreciate the effort, I guess. But I just can't watch the scene with the Vickers. I have to like cringe and look away every time.
Makes you physically angry.
Yeah, I'm just, I got like the cartoon steam coming out of my ears. Besides that part, it's a pretty good episode.
Guns jammed.
It's jammed. I gotta piss on it. So, just my final opinion is, Lawrence of Arabia got shafted hard on this one. He lost in only pretty much like one major category, and it was 10,000 kills.
I know, yeah.
So that cost him the match. I mean, we can only harp on it so much. Not only, but he lost a technology that is outdated from what he was using. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's literally like the gun that replaced the Gatling gun for a lot of countries. This episode's pretty much, the result is total BS. I love me America, and I love my American warriors, but damn, Lawrence deserved this one. How can you win in every category? I don't even need to say that sentence. How can you win in every category and lose the entire fight? Yeah. Robert Daly also says, newer technology doesn't always mean better. You know what, Robert? Yeah, it usually does. It pretty much does.
Especially on this show, too, where the one time a gun faced an ancient warrior, the gun absolutely destroyed him.
Yeah. What about 9/11?
Mac bringing up 9/11 for whatever reason on the aftermath. Yeah. And anytime a bronze warrior fights a steel warrior, they get their ass kicked, except for that one time the Spartan beat the samurai, which is...
newer technology doesn't always mean the win. Yeah, it does, bitch.
Yeah, every time.
That's my final word.
Majority of the time, I would say. Yeah. I honestly...
Replace the Gatling gun, and there's no way Teddy wins. Because just on one-on-one, Lawrence is younger and more fit. He's going to win that matchup. Mm-hmm. Teddy on like generalship is going to lose.
Maybe the only other case where Teddy wins is if they have to fight hand-to-hand in a boxing ring. Yeah. Like Teddy Roosevelt's probably beating his ass.
And then his ear falls off.
Right. But other than that, I mean, I think you're right, Craig.
Yeah. I mean, Lawrence literally helped shape the outcome of World War I. Mm-hmm. And Teddy was in like one major skirmish.
Yeah.
I don't think those experiences quite equal out.
He was part of a major battle in a war you may not have ever heard of, like,
yeah. Both cool people though. Both have very interesting history. I mean, I didn't know much about Lawrence of Arabia before this, and I learned a lot, but there is a lot that I even have yet to learn about him, which I probably would check him out. But I couldn't help myself that I also looked into Teddy a lot. Yeah. And two very, very interesting guys.
Okay. Mike, do you want to close this out?
Yeah. I'm kind of right there with everyone else. It's doesn't really make any sense other than they decided before they even like picked who Teddy was fighting that Teddy was going to win. And technology, experience, not having asthma, not needing glasses, none of that mattered. Teddy Roosevelt is a cool dude, and so you should win based on just being cool. And that jam, if we're gonna base it off of what happened in the show and not them already deciding before the show's shot who's winning, that jam is what decided it.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I want to note is like, I know the answer is that it's dangerous, and they probably didn't want to. I guess they could bring back the cowboy people from Jesse James to do it, but it's like, why didn't they do any mounted combat test for either of these warriors? That was one of the weird things I kept thinking.
I hadn't even thought about that, Mike, and I think it's a great point. Like both these guys,
rough riders.
Yeah, both these guys. I mean, they fought from foot, but a lot of the combat these guys did was from horseback.
You'd know they would have had to got a camel.
Yeah, right. Got a camel.
Yeah, where's the camel? All the budget went to the elephant.
Dude, the camel versus the horse. What's better?
Yeah.
They're like, well, the horse is faster, but the camel is more reliable.
It's cool.
In the spit test, the camel takes the edge. And then finally, final Civ report.
On a Civ report, I am down to 2 more Spains. I may have put too many Spains in the game. I have not lost a single Rough Rider. True to their name, they're very rough, take a lot of damage.
Hell yeah.
Most of these bad boys are like fully upgraded, which is kind of hard. This guy, 5 upgrades. You got to do a lot of combat.
Teddy's in that unit.
Yeah.
This is Teddy. No one is upgraded to 5. Napoleon's over here, having Napoleon help me out. He's driving in a Jeep for some reason. I don't know why, but he's really, really supporting the Rough Riders, making sure they get through. Then I have my little bombards that are make-believe Gatling gun cores.
Yeah, head cannon Gatling guns. Yep.
So, Mike, your homework is I need you to finish that game and send me a screenshot of the results screen. And you're going to see it right now. And if you forget to do it, it's going to be an embarrassing snapshot of you from the Christmas party. So you better
remember.
Yeah.
I think I just need to find 2 capitals.
Well, hurry up. I mean, this episode's going to come out in a week.
Oh, no.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it, gentlemen. I only have a few more episodes left, and then we are done.
Holy cow.
Which is fucking nuts. We're making no promises on any other Spike TV shows.
The long-awaited Mansers pod.
Stay tuned for what is next.
The thing is, I don't think a Mansers podcast. I see a format there. I don't know if
ways
it's for
to die
us.
would be bad.
Well, I think with Mansers, it would be fun is if you take an episode and then you actually look up if they were legit or not.
Like the real story about it.
Yeah, or like, is this true? So, but we have to consider the future. So
can you freeze can you fart in a jar and freeze it? And then they have like girls in bikinis like ew.
We could do like some of the tests, like if that was one of it. Just like,
that would be kind of funny.
Okay. You're seeing it live. No commitment one way or the other, but appreciate you guys watching.
Fart in a jar and freeze.
What content?
Yeah, we should just do that experiment regardless. See if we can.
Let's just go check it out right now.
Brendan, as the science guru, do you have any insight as if we could do that?
I wasn't paying attention. What?
Could you fart in a jar and freeze it and then smell it later?
No. I'm pretty sure you can't do that.
Well, until we get the actual.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see the actual data. Jeff's fabrication.
I'm sad that I remember that
fart lab?
episode. I'm pretty sure they like freeze the jar in like liquid nitrogen or something. That was like the only way to keep the smell contained or something. I don't know. I'm gonna go watch some Mansers tonight.
All right.
Let's fucking end this thing. Do you know that there's a second Mansers, like they redid it? And it's like a lot of it I recognize as the same Mansers like topics as the old one, which is disappointing. But I saw like they like remade it.
Boo.
It's like I like the original better.
Yeah.
But
I hear they're gonna remake Deadliest 4
with us.
True. Yeah. Fucking woke media won't allow another Mansers.
Damn right. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Rough Riders, sound off in the comments. Subscribe to us on YouTube. It's the only thing we're on.
Right.
Leave a comment, leave a like, help us grow. Yeah, Rough Riders. Only got one more request of you. Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.
Stay deadly.
X.